How can there be so many? There were a bunch of loot chests all over the place. When I noticed a presence behind me, I attacked immediately. Was it just the sound of the wind? But I felt a presence. There was an injured person in there. He must be strong to have survived until now. Should I finish him off and take his loot? No, I'm leaving. I need to prioritize my survival. When I left, there really was someone there. He thanked God for still being alive. Of course he would have won if he wasn't injured, or at least that's what he thought. Soon he went back to looting the chests. That's when I hit his head. I'm a former army sergeant. With my experience, there's no way I die here. But I'll tell you how we ended up in this situation. How he's a strong veteran, even though he's just an ordinary Korean. It had been 6 months since he left the army. Jin Se-woon spends the day reading manhwa. He wanted to live in a different world. At 23 years old, he's addicted. Now he has to get ready to go back to school. Ever since he got discharged from the army, he hangs out at an internet cafe. And then he grinded the game and got into the top 10 rankers in 3 months. The game is loyal ground. 100 players drop from the plane. They collect weapons, supplies, and kill other players until only one is left. He's so addicted that even if his friend dies, alone, he takes out a bunch of people. The game is literally a battle royale. At the end of the game, there were 2 players teaming up against Jin Se-woon. They went into the house, seeing supplies on the floor. They thought nobody was there, but they were wrong. The main guy is really experienced. Only a sound was heard in the room. Realizing his teammate died, he started running. But soon he got one tapped in the head. Jin Se-woon was the winner. Noticing the time on the monitor, he has to go back because he starts studying tomorrow. Suddenly, his mom sends a message giving him money for his studies. On the way back, he feels guilty for wasting time. In bed, he thinks that starting tomorrow, he won't play anymore. He checks some news and ends up falling asleep. The next day, he was on his way to school, and his friend was texting him to play. While he thought about skipping class, a purple light appeared. When he turned around, he got swallowed by the light, leaving only his backpack there. What place is this? There's a giant statue and a bunch of people around. He blacked out for a moment and thought he was being punished for thinking about skipping class. But why is it so loud? A bunch of people were fighting, and there were even mages casting magic. While some fought, others were cleaning their swords. Why were there so many cosplayers here? Where was he? Who are all these people? The statue announced that 100 players had been detected. Then it initialized the system, starting with language synchronization. Suddenly everyone was speaking the same language. Even so, people didn't stop fighting. A mage was asking if it was his enemy who brought him to this place. Furious, he said he wouldn't be fooled anymore. But the undead didn't seem to care. Then the archmage starts his attack, and with all his strength he throws a spell at the undead. But nothing happened, and that was confusing. Maybe because he was already dead. Now he was alive? Suddenly the system announces that the game is about to start. The difficulty is on easy, and you need to be in the top 90 to pass. The map is King Kingdom's capital, and the reward will be given to the first top 10. The tutorial was skipped. In the waiting room, player attacks are neutralized, and they were given a game map. The game was Cloyd Survival, and it will last 100 days. Each day the map shrinks. This game will continue until only one is left, and if the game ends or you die, you'll return to the original world. Players who don't place in the top 90 will never be able to enter Cloyd Survival again. In there they can get items to become stronger. Jin Se-woon realized this was identical to Loyal Ground, but there was something different. The humans here seemed insanely strong. Is he the only normal person? Even if it's a dream, he doesn't want to die. Suddenly someone calls out to him. A big man asks what he's staring at over there, and where he's from, but he quickly gets furious at being ignored. At that moment, the countdown to start the game began. With 2 seconds left, the man asks if he's crazy for laughing. He's dreaming a fun dream, so why wouldn't he laugh? Pointing his finger, he says he has all the knowledge and can easily destroy people like him and survive. Then the game started. Everyone started falling from the sky like meteors. A lot of them were dropping straight down. They wanted the good loot in that area, which must be rare. But at first Jin prefers to play it safe, so he thinks about dropping somewhere more isolated. When it announced the word descend, he hits the ground like thunder. This was really similar to the game. He stood still for a while. He felt sick from the landing, so he decided to go into the house right away. All of a sudden he heard something. He forgot to check if anyone had landed near him, so he ran to the house. Everything would be over if one of those mages landed near him, and he didn't have a weapon. He quickly shut the door. He was panting like he'd been in a Mr. Beast video for money. Only now did he regret mocking the big guy, thinking maybe he had followed him. But when he looked out the window, it was just the sound of the wind. Only then did he go down to loot. He quickly started searching. That's when he bumped into something. It was a heavy crossbow, and it really was heavy, just like the description. He also found the bolts. As soon as he picked it up, how to use it popped into his head. For a Korean army sergeant, this was nothing, so he pulled the trigger, and the bolt shot out like a rocket. This definitely wasn't a normal crossbow. That thing could easily turn into a tank. If he learns to use it properly, it'll be really useful. After searching a lot and not finding anything else, he decided to go loot somewhere else. His idea was to make the most of it before running into a player. He opens the door to check if there's an enemy. He quickly looks for loot, until he finds a scroll. This was an item that could heal him if it was torn, meaning it was something unreal. Now a backpack item or something like that would be nice. When he looked back, he noticed a glow. It was a Black Star QI Palms martial arts book. He quickly taps to learn it. The book floats in the air and tears itself apart. It's like his understanding changed. When he looked at his hand, the hand that had been normal before started to wear down, like he'd been training for hours or years. When he picked up a fork from the plate, now he can throw it like it's a gunshot. Did he really learn martial arts like that? The author just writes whatever's convenient. Our hero quickly pulled the fork out from the wall and was pretty satisfied by the results. He was now certain that this game was similar to Rogue, as since there was a martial arts book, there must be magic books as well. After searching the entire house, the player decided to go somewhere else. It was now nighttime, and the protagonist had spent the entire day gathering stuff and was now searching for a hiding spot. At that moment, he noticed something intriguing. One of the houses had its light on. This could mean that there was a rare item inside it, but the light could also indicate that this hiding spot was already taken. Despite not knowing how many enemies were near him, Seo-woon was certain that the one here was either a fabulous hunter or a complete beginner. According to him, the first floor seemed to be empty. This made our hero believe that the enemy was on the second floor. Seo-woon started to take courage in his weapon and his skill, Dark Star, as they might give him a chance even if the enemy was an expert. And so, he began climbing the stairs. The protagonist was moving slowly, his crossbow in hand, ready for anything. Only then did he realize what was in front of him. Upon seeing the item, and realizing that it was a lamp, Seo-woon began to wonder if he was walking into a trap. Only then did he notice a door next to the lamp. At first, the protagonist wasn't sure if he should enter, but in the end, he forced his way into the room. From the looks of it, it seemed empty. After checking one last time, and making sure that no one was here, Seo-woon collapsed to the ground, as he had deluded himself into thinking that there was an enemy in this house. Yet he couldn't deny the fact that him being wrong was truly relieving. Only then did our hero find something in the drawer. The gamer had found a ring that boosted his strength by 20 points. The distributed effect seemed interesting. And so, the crossbow user quickly put it on. The power of the ring immediately manifested itself. Suddenly, the hero's body didn't feel as heavy as before, and the weight of the crossbow had almost disappeared. At that moment, he came to a realization regarding his most recent boost. And so, in order to make sure, he opened his status window. The stats of the young man weren't impressive, yet upon learning the martial arts skill, the game classified him as a martial artist. Seo-woon was pretty happy with the items that he had acquired, as he descended on this land with practically nothing. Now free, he decided to scavenge the first floor. Shortly after, he came across a storage item. This was the second ring that the protagonist had found in this house. The user needed to hold the item in hand and think subspace, and press the ring or think about it in order to open the storage. It was then revealed that the inventory of the subspace ring had limited storage. With that, our protagonist immediately summoned the subspace. This odd ring was rather convenient, as it spared the main character from carrying all of his stuff. He even began wishing for something similar to this ring to exist on Earth. Jin Seo-woon started to think about the life that he would have on Earth if he were able to return with the skills and items that he would have acquired from the game. He then began to search for a kill log in order to see if anyone had been eliminated yet. Our hero quickly found it. Seeing how there were now 99 players left, he decided to keep on farming until 90 survivors remained. Shortly after, upon scavenging the rest of the house, our hero found consumable objects and hidden weapons that would go well with his Dark Star skill. Now he was confronted with the choice of either spending the night in this house or leaving it to search another. It was obvious that the maniacs that were with our hero in the lobby would roam the map even at night. Yet seeing how fighting was the only way to get to the top 10, our boy began to wish to stumble upon more great locations. Since fewer players would be roaming the map at night, Seo-woon decided to check one last location for the day. While walking, he realized just how amazing the strength ring was, as despite having been on the move for countless hours, he wasn't tired at all. The game seemed pretty realistic, as even with fatigue out of the way, hunger and thirst were still problems that the young man had to face. Seeing how there was no food nearby, he began wondering if he would be able to find any in a private house. But just as he began checking the map for the closest one, a beast was suddenly heard. The blood of the protagonist froze in his veins as he realized that something was behind him. He immediately started to move, and hid behind a tree out of panic as he couldn't sense the beast. Upon taking a look at the monster, he realized that the appearance of the creature was familiar. The monster that had now found our protagonist was a werewolf. Panic invaded the mind of Seo-woon as he started to run away while the beast tried to kill him. Its claws were so powerful that they easily tore through a tree. The two beasts seemed to be working together. This game that was supposedly a fight between players turned out to have monsters inside. Seo-woon would have never exited the house if he was aware that such creatures exist on the map. As he used to be in the top 10 of Rogue, the protagonist began to think that he would become a disappointment if he met his end like that. Only then did he spot a house ahead. Seo-woon ran as fast as possible, and just like that, our hero finally hid inside the house. But, with misfortune, the beasts had followed him there. Now in a pickle, he tried to come up with a plan of action. Seo-woon decided to take a quick peek outside. Upon seeing the monsters relying on their noses so much, he realized that they must be tracking his scent. So he decided to attack first, thinking that it would bring him victory, and thus, he pointed his crossbow at the wolves. After aiming his arrow carefully, the hero fired it from inside the house. Just like that, Seo-woon was able to snipe a werewolf in the head. The first of the two threats had been taken down. Due to the strength boost, reloading the crossbow became a piece of cake. But just as the protagonist rushed to do so in order to shoot the other werewolf, he realized something horrifying. The sniper had been spotted, and thus, he tried his best to dodge the giant claw of the monster. But despite his best efforts, his face was scratched by the beast. The werewolf was now inside the house. It immediately charged at the human with murderous intent. Our protagonist tried to shoot it down, but the monster protected himself by shielding his head with his hand. And just like that, our hero was now at the mercy of the werewolf. Yet even when all hope seemed to be lost, he summoned his subspace in order to fight back. From it, he pulled out a knife. The hero then resorted to his Dark Star ambush skill in order to put a hole through the chest of the monster. After going through the thick body of the wolf, the knife bent against the wall. Jin Seowon, who was determined to survive, didn't want to be taken out by an NPC. Just like that, our hero was able to clutch a 2v1. At the sight of the two werewolves, he assumed that he was going to meet his demise. The experience was so frightening that he found himself unable to stand on his feet. If it wasn't for the throwing daggers, our hero would have been taken down by a simple mob. Only then did he notice a small pouch in front of him. Seowon assumed that this was a monster drop. Seeing how he had gotten food and water, he realized that this game allows him to hunt his meals. The protagonist began considering searching this house while eating his jerky. He quickly stumbled upon armor that he compared to a bulletproof vest in his game. At first, the armor seemed too big for our scrawny hero, but just then it shrunk to match his small size. According to the system, this item was known as the Superior Orichalcum Quirus that would grant our protagonist magic resistance to fire and wind. Seowon was left impressed, as this piece of equipment increased many of his stats. Our hero was certain that this house had something more to offer. He was then left confused, as he felt an item despite seeing nothing. The player assumed that this was a concealed object. He seemed to have found a piece of cloth. Upon putting it on, the system revealed that it was known as the Mantle of the Gods that would allow the user to blend perfectly with the shadows when staying still. Seeing how this item would make him invisible to identification magic and conceal his presence, the protagonist couldn't help but be pleased. This godly item was perfect for survival, as it would allow our hero to move through the night without being noticed. And thus, the young man decided to go put the cape to the test, as he was certain that it would help him on his journey. Seowon was lucky to stumble upon this old house in the middle of the forest, as it granted him great items on his second day. Later on that night, Seowon began to assume that he hadn't met any player yet due to the fact that he had landed in the outskirts of the map. But just then, the screams of someone came to his attention. This person was running as fast as possible and was injured. The young man with the scarred face regretted not having enough time to use this one item, as it would have allowed him to beat the apprentice. Our hero, under his invisible cloak, watched him from a safe hiding spot. The young man in question was annoyed to have run into a mage. The one with the scarred face didn't seem to be an experienced survivor, and thus, our protagonist was certain that he could eliminate him. Jin Seowon then desperately tried to convince himself that this was a game and that he wouldn't be taking the life of a real person. At that moment, the magic words were chanted. A huge fireball flew by our hero. The young man with the burnt face was terrified, as he had no time to react, and just like that, he found himself getting burned to a crisp. At first, our hero thought that he had witnessed a murder, but what he saw next left him completely shocked. Seowon, who wondered about the identity of the shooter, was now certain that he was in a game, as he saw a chest appear where the corpse should have been. At that moment, the mage who took revenge on the stable hand who dared to steal his items passed right by him. The red hat found it to be quite a shame, as the boy hadn't died peacefully from his first strike. Seowon was left completely amazed by the powers of this cloak, as it allowed him to go unnoticed even with the enemy right next to him. The mage known as Karen claimed that this stable hand should feel honored to have been slain by him, and with that, he rushed to check the chest that he had dropped. Our hero could have been demolished by the mage, as he was just a beginner, just like the now dead man. This shocking experience made him realize that hesitation would result in his demise, and so he made up his mind. Jin Seowon would now do what was necessary in order to survive. Karen was happy with the item he had found in the chest of his late victim. Only then did he feel startled. A high-speed projectile had hit the barrier that he had put around himself. Karen realized that he had been too loud while hunting his prey, which attracted the attention of another player. Seowon decided to take yet another shot, and once again, the mage couldn't react to it. If nothing was done, the magician's magical barrier would shatter. And so, while our protagonist remained calm in his hiding spot, the one with the fire powers began to panic. He tried to predict the direction where the sniper was hiding and fired a fireball at it. The mage then urged the hidden sniper to come out and fight like a true warrior. The response to the stunt came in the form of a flying knife. Its target was the clueless young mage, and before this one could even realize what was happening, his barrier was broken into 1,000 pieces. Karen, who was now defenseless, started to panic even more while urging the enemy to come out. Yet Seowon was determined to stay well hidden. With that, the fire user decided to resort to a powerful spell. Yet before he could even realize it, an arrow had pierced his head. He couldn't even finish the incantation of his attack before having his head blown away by the hidden sniper. Jin Seowon had achieved victory. The eliminated player left nothing but a chest behind. Seeing how he couldn't risk being spotted, Seowon decided to loot the chest as fast as possible before quickly making his leave. The chest of the mage had excellent items, including a medium healing scroll. Our hero had also acquired a necklace of pure gold that was the brand of the Escrow's Magic Council, which he deemed useless but decided to take anyway. Only then did he notice something intriguing in the other chest. Seowon had found the item known as the Circle Stone that would install a magic circle around his heart, which would provide him with mana. Seeing how he would also learn the magic of the nature of the circle, the young man realized that this item could turn him into a true mage. This also made him understand that this was the item that the one with the burnt face didn't have enough time to use. Seowon started pitying this man, yet decided to gladly use his item, and so he dumped everything in his subspace before making his leave. Our hero would now search for a good hiding spot to use this new item. After some time, he managed to find a house that seemed decent. Once inside, the circle stone was immediately used. According to the system, the process, which required him to do nothing else, would take 3 hours and could potentially make the protagonist experience slight pain. And thus, the potential pain started. Seo-woon did his best to silence his screams during 3 hellish hours of pure agony. It felt like the system had lied to the protagonist, who had almost lost himself to the pain. Seo-woon understood that magic was harder to learn than martial arts and decided to check his status window. From what he saw, the boy was pleased to see that he had acquired a mana stat. The young man then decided to check the number of survivors, as 2 had perished right in front of his eyes. But as soon as it opened, the hidden sniper was left utterly baffled. More than half of the players had already been eliminated. Upon taking a look at the kill log, he realized that numerous survivors had perished at the hands of a so-called Nam-sa-gwang. A little earlier, Aemon desperately tried to run for his life. Yet to his misfortune, the one after him greatly enjoyed the hunt. Only then did he trip over a rock. The one with the giant stone fell face first to the ground. Now defenseless, the swordsman started to beg to be one of the 90 remaining survivors. Seeing how he didn't want the others to surpass him, the man began to beg from the bottom of his heart. But despite his best efforts, his head had been exploded by the one that must have become a celebrity among the rest of the players by now. Just like that, Nam Sagwang left the scene, leaving behind nothing but the chest of his latest victim. On the 3rd day of the Salish game, 54 players had been eliminated in the span of a single night. Our hero decided to stay away from Nam Sagwang, who had caused most of the carnage. But only then did he realize that he might be able to use the situation in order to get into the top 10. The hero began to wonder about the prizes that would be given to the top 10, theorizing that he might be allowed to take some items from the game to the real world. Seo-woon quickly got a hold of himself as he began to dream big, shortly after realizing that there was a serial killer among the players. And so he decided to finish his preparations in order to change location. The young man began to wonder if the power dwelling inside his body realized that he had acquired a magic skill book yesterday. The book in question was the Magic Book of Windball that allows the user to create spheres of wind relative to his power. He didn't think twice before using it on himself. At first, our hero didn't feel any different, when suddenly spells began to appear in his head. And just like that, he chanted the magic words in order to activate the spell. With that, 4 mini wind spheres appeared. The young man was somehow disappointed by the result. For that reason, he threw the small balls away. But suddenly, they exploded in a powerful burst of wind. These puny spheres that pack quite the punch had the potential to be convenient. But since he had used all of his mana in one spell, our hero was suddenly tired. With time, the livable zone on the map began to shrink, as our protagonist kept roaming its edges in order to find more items. Seo-woon began to think that he wouldn't find many players, as their number had greatly decreased, and he wanted to farm as fast as possible before the area got smaller. But little did he know someone was watching him from above, observing every detail of the young man's journey. The old one was left quite intrigued, and so he decided to keep on moving. After half a day, our hero arrived at another set of houses, but what he saw there left him quite speechless. The many chests lying around meant that a carnage had happened in this very place. The instincts of the young man then noticed something horrifying, and so he resorted to his magic powers in order to strike the nearby door with his windball explosives. At first, our hero tried to shake the feeling off. He thought that there was an enemy nearby, but only then did he notice something intriguing. Upon looking inside the house, he realized that it was tainted with blood. This must mean that it sheltered a wounded player. Seo-woon feared that the enemy was skilled, as he had survived this long in the game, yet was tempted to take him out for the items, seeing how he was injured. But in the end, he quickly turned around and left the scene, seeing how survival was his main priority. After waiting some time, and making sure that the cloaked one had left the scene, the player finally got out of his hiding spot. He had concealed himself at the last minute, seeing how he was about to get discovered. The man found himself pretty annoyed, as our puny hero would have been easy to kill. With that, he decided to loot the remaining chests before resuming his course. But suddenly, an arrow came out of nowhere and pierced his skull. Only then did the player realize what had happened. Yet, unfortunately, it was already too late. Just like that, the trap set by our hidden sniper had worked perfectly. With that, our hero decided to loot the chests before making his way to the outskirts of the map. Only then was he startled by a voice, pointing out how skilled he was in these kinds of situations. Seo-woon began to panic as he was about to be caught off guard. But the old man reassured the boy that he had only approached him to ask a few questions. When asked about his name, the old one explained that introductions would be pointless, seeing how they were from 2 different realities. This was the first time that Jin Seo-woon had met this type of person in Claude. And so, as the sun began to set, the old one asked the young man if he had played this game before. He explained that he had been watching his quick progress from afar and asked him if he was aware that none of this was real. Jin Seo-woon, who was shocked to not have noticed the old man sooner, stated that this was his first time here and that there were similar games back in his world. The one with no name was greatly amazed by this, as he recognized that the young one in front of him was truly from another world. Jin Seo-woon and the old man then noticed that the night of the 3rd day had already begun. When asked about the size of the moon back on Earth, the boy realized that he had never noticed how big the one here was. As it turns out, the moon in both Seo-woon's and the old man's realities was smaller than the one in this place. The old man explained that he was interested in the game's protagonist, who argued that they risked a surprise attack by staying here. Thus, the one with no name proposed moving to a safer location in order to resume the conversation, while our hero demanded assurance that he wouldn't be betrayed. The old man ignored his question and reminded him that he must keep quiet at all times. He then began jumping from one tree to another while explaining that silence was their only way not to be spotted. Yet the old man was moving a little too fast for our geeky protagonist. And just like that, the the two of them went to a different location. At the time, our hero didn't know how much meeting this one man would affect his life. Later on, somewhere else on the map, once safe in a high-up tree, Seo-woon, who was afraid to fall, explained that his modern world had created virtual games similar to this one. Seo-woon started to wonder how long the elder had been spying on him, as he had witnessed firsthand how quickly he had developed. He then answered the question that our hero was thinking by explaining that the two of them had landed in the same spot. At first, the old man wanted to spend the entire match alone in peace, yet he ended up watching our hero, as he wanted to ask him why and how they had been dragged here. But upon learning that the one from the modern world was just as ignorant, the old man was confused, as there were supposedly similar games back in his reality. Seo-woon explained that he was referring to innocent and literal games that harm no one, and that no one knows why the creator of the game has brought them here. The old man quickly understood what the young man meant, but to his intrigue, he claimed that this game would be someone's golden chance. According to our hero, players don't actually die in this game, and the promised rewards for the top 10 would be the items that they had acquired in the game. The old man understood that the protagonist was referring to the gear, the martial arts, and the skills that he had picked up on his journey. Seo-woon explained that, unlike the old man, who must have an easy life, powers like magic could truly pull him out of his misery. It was easy to see that the old man was a well-respected master in martial arts, unlike our pathetic guy, who sees this game as a way to gain an easier life. Seo-woon was then startled and rushed to quiet down the nameless master, who burst out laughing. As the conversation kept going on, they realized that they didn't even know how to access the map. With that, Jin Seo-woon and the old master spent the entire night conversing with each other, as he explained to the old man in detail how the game works. As morning finally arrived, their feet finally touched the ground. The old man then apologized to the protagonist for wasting so much of his time. Yet Seo-woon, who appreciated the tales of the old man's world, didn't mind this, as the old man's side was the safest location possible. Seeing how he had learned a lot about the game from him, the old man asked the young one how he could ever pay him back. Hearing this, our protagonist immediately demanded to learn the martial arts of the old master, as they would be crucial for his goal to survive until the end. After thinking about it for a brief instant, the expert martial artist shocked the beginner by claiming that this would be complicated. According to the old man, Seo-woon must brace himself to meet his unavoidable demise. And thus, the master asked the young warrior if he was truly prepared to take such a huge risk. According to the old man, the cheat codes that would allow him to succeed quickly would come at a heavy price. And so, as he asked the young man if he was ready, Seo-woon reminded him that in this game, real death doesn't exist. In that case, the method might be possible, leaving our protagonist excited. Seo-woon became excited as the old man explained that there might be some hope for him. With that, the master decided to check how much inner energy his pupil had, but what he found left him utterly shocked. The boy was so weak that even the old man's dog had more energy than him, seeing how Seo-woon was from a magicless reality after all. With that, the student was instructed to sit cross-legged. Everything had now been set. The old man explained that the young one would now experience horrifying pain, and that he wouldn't be able to react to it. According to him, failure to endure the agony would result in death. The senses of the protagonist had been greatly sharpened to the point where the air felt like knives on his skin and lava in his lungs. At that moment, something odd began to happen as our hero was struck with a sudden sensation. Seo-woon started to scream in pain and agony. This experience was so intense that the young man thought that he was about to meet his demise. But only then did it happen. As he plunged into the sensation even further with his enhanced senses, he suddenly saw himself as well as the master. Despite the internal screams, to the outside the player seemed perfectly still. And just like that, the experience ended. After this horrifying experience, the stomach of our hero had been greatly upset. The old man explained to the Warfang hero that the fact that he had survived this method meant that he had potential to grow. Things would now be different, as the old one had changed the flow of chi inside the young man. The master then pointed out how his student wanted to gain strength quickly, and had used a fragment of his own soul in order to create an absorption gate. Normally, human beings should only be able to absorb chi by breathing, yet this new gate would make things different for our protagonist. According to the old man, the flesh, the mind, and the spirit that compose a human are all connected by vital energy. He then asked Seo-woon about what happens to the energy when someone dies, so the boy theorized that it perishes with its owner. According to the old one, this wasn't the case. As the vital energy would get divided, this was similar to a drop of water exploding upon touching the ground. Upon death, the vital energy returns to nature in order to maintain this cycle of life, but according to the old one, some people found this to be a waste. These individuals started killing to steal vital energy, but since the power wasn't theirs, some lost their powers, while others lost their lives due to the inner chaos. And now the old man had given the young sniper the power to use this dark ability. Seo-woon realized that he could have truly died, while the old one explained that he was different from the others, as he would absorb using a gate made from a soul. The master had also twisted the body of the young man that was deprived of inner energy to make it a perfect vessel for the absorbed chi. Seo-woon immediately guessed that the old man had given him such a deadly technique due to the circumstances of the game. The one with no name realized the other day that even after dying, the energy of the players lingered in its place. This technique, which would be considered evil as it required killing, would in fact be perfect for the environment of this game. According to the old man, if the young protagonist kept on killing to survive, he would become greatly powerful by the end of the game. And so, with that being said, the master decided to bid his pupil farewell. At that moment, Jin Seowon demanded to know the name of the man who had given him this great gift. The old man introduced himself as the Serene Immortal, Jang Dochin, and revealed the name of the forbidden technique to be the unrestrained inner energy technique. And so, as the hero claimed that he was in the eternal depths of the immortal, this one advised him to work hard in order to gradually increase his strength. Dochin then opened the quite useful map that the gamer had showed him. In the end, the old man affirmed to the young one that he would look forward to their next meeting. And just like that, the immortal went on his way. It wasn't a surprise for the hidden sniper to see the master quickly disappear. This made him wish for a technique that would allow him to move his body more easily. With that being said, Seowon decided to focus on the game and head to the outskirts of the permitted zone. Due to his incredible speed, the master made the young man and himself each the center in an instant. But now on his own, the young man had to walk for half a day to return to the outskirts of this incredibly wide map. The player then spotted a house with a light in it. This could either mean that this place was completely empty or sheltering a complete noob with no experience. Even so, Seowon charged ahead as he was determined to conquer this house. Our hero quietly entered the place. He did his best to sneak around without making a sound. And just like that, the relieved protagonist extinguished the lantern's light. And yet, he couldn't help but be disappointed. Despite being safe, this house only had some food and a small healing scroll to offer. Seowon then quickly realized that he couldn't rest last night as he had spent it conversing with the master. And so, he decided to get himself some shut-eye. With that, our player enjoyed a peaceful night of sleep. The 5th day of the game quickly dawned. Our hero was enjoying the few minutes of sleep he had left. Only then was the sound of footsteps heard. The one sleeping woke up startled upon hearing a voice in the house. An enemy had now reached his hiding spot. Seowon, who was groggy because he had overslept, rushed to grab his crossbow. At that moment, the warrior opened the door, aiming to rest in the house, only to then find something alarming. Upon opening the door, the warrior saw a crossbow pointed at him. The young man quickly took the shot, but the samurai was quick and managed to cut the arrow just in time. Seeing that this house was already inhabited greatly annoyed the warrior. At that moment, our hero attacked him with his throwing knives. The samurai, who kept on charging ahead despite the damage, criticized his opponent for daring to use concealed weapons. Only then was he grabbed by the head. The man was then savagely slammed into the ground. Seowon then quickly kicked the sword out of his hand. Our hero was particularly irritated, as his beautiful dream had been interrupted by the one that was now begging for his life. The warrior relinquished all of his belongings to the protagonist and began to complain about how hard surviving was. But the young sniper couldn't care less as he mercilessly stabbed the samurai in the head. And just like that, the warrior known as Shio Long met his end at the hands of Jin Seowon, who was also struggling to survive the game. After his most recent murder, our hero noticed something intriguing, as the chest left behind by the samurai had some sort of green aura around it. The protagonist quickly recognized this as the energy that the master was referring to. Even the blood on his fingers reeked of this energy. Our hero was now in contact with the so-called chi. At that moment, the absorption process began to happen. Seowon felt immense power coursing through his veins as he got his first taste of vital energy. The energy absorbed from one person made our protagonist feel incredibly light and filled with strength. Seeing this, he rushed to check his status window. Seowon had now gotten an internal energy stat, acquired 20 points, that now moved. This made him feel even more grateful for the gift of the old man and made him determined to secure more energy, even without dirtying his hands. The survivor then decided to check how many players were left in the game. But upon opening the kill log, he was left utterly shocked. On the 5th day, a total of 76 players had already been eliminated. At that moment, something changed on the screen. The number of survivors just went from 24 to 23. Nam Sagwan, with his martial arts, was able to kill someone called Cal Verstappen. Somewhere else on the map, someone was about to meet his end. Yet before passing, the player uttered the name of his killer. And just like that, nothing was left of him behind but a chest of his items. Nam Sagwan was rather disappointed, as the player who was the one to attack first turned out to be incredibly weak. Annoyed by all of this, he decided to check the kill log. Only 22 players remained in the game. For some reason, the name of our protagonist that appeared in the kill log seemed familiar to the martial artist. Meanwhile, the same protagonist decided to avoid Nam Sagwang at all costs. He knew very well that he wouldn't stand a chance against him, seeing how much he had struggled to kill a nobody. With that, our hero decided to loot up the house before the map shrinks even further. Seeing how the samurai only left mediocre loot behind him, it was safe to think that he could have won the fight if he had better items on him. Our hero decided to disappear into the wild until the number of players decreases even more. 7 days have passed since then. Seowon realized how great his fortune was at the start of the game. During the 7 days, all the loot that he had acquired from hunting could be considered absolutely useless. And since the hidden sniper had been hiding on the outskirts of the map and moving all the time, he was spared from stumbling upon other enemies. On day 12 of the game, Seowon was getting tired of continuously eating jerky. Now, in front of a bear, he began to think about how there were only 20 players left in the game. As soon as he got his hand out of the barrier, he felt as if it was paralyzed. The hero, who would be frozen outside of the zone, started to think about how all the remaining players were being cautious and how the madman was the only one killing. At that moment, the young man noticed something intriguing. Upon seeing the huge, small cloud forming above a nearby area, Seowon deduced that there was a big fight going on. The madman was almost out of breath. A bunch of powerful players had united all together in order to find and take down Nam Sagwang. The player found it rather pathetic for all of them to gang up on a single child like him, but was happy as they spared him the effort of hunting them down. Nam Sagwang then asked the ones who were after his life if they had braced themselves for death before coming here. And just like that, the boy jumped into the air. At first, the players assumed that their target was trying to escape. But just then, the boy grabbed one of their skulls and popped it with great ease like a balloon. This left everyone else incredibly horrified. Nam Sagwang then decided to take down a second player. In the blink of an eye, the madman started to tear his way through the countless players. This battle couldn't be classified as a fight. In fact, one could even describe it as a total massacre, seeing how the players were getting butchered left and right. The kill log made it obvious that if nothing was done, Nam Sagwang would become the undisputed champion of this game. Meanwhile, our shocked protagonist watched in horror as the madman started to add more and more names to his KDA. Seeing this, our hero began to think that Nam Sagwang must be using some kind of cheat code. In the end, the weak players couldn't do anything against such a powerful young man. He was particularly annoyed that he was forced to soak himself in the sticky blood of his enemies. With that being said, the madman decided to go find a place where he could wash himself. Some time had passed, and it was now nighttime. Someone arrived at the scene. The one with pointy ears recognized the bloody staff as the one of his peer. Seeing this, the elf made an oath in the name of Escrow to avenge his fallen comrade, Elizabeth. 89 out of 100 players had already met their demise. Our hero just had to wait for one more death in order to enter the top 10. He also realized that he needed to secure better gear if he wished to stand a chance against the all-powerful Nam Sagwang. The young man then spotted a mansion that would be swallowed by the Forbidden Zone tomorrow morning, and so he rushed there, claiming it to be the last place where he could farm in peace. Sia-woon quietly opened the door to check if there was someone inside. Our hero was amazed by the inside of the mansion. Unlike the puny houses he had visited, he was now in an enormous and well-decorated establishment. He then stumbled upon Royal Guard armor that would require him to have a strength of 110 inches order to wear. Sia-woon, who had a pathetic strength of 30, had no choice but to leave the powerful item behind. As he kept on searching the mansion, he noticed another interesting item. Our hero had acquired an elixir of insight that would allow him to increase his inner energy and had a reset time of 3 hours. This item left our hero amazed and made him wonder if this mansion was only filled with incredible things to loot. He even found a martial arts book titled Secrets of the Unbreakable Fist. And just as our marksman began to think that these items would require him to hide somewhere like the Circle Stone, he suddenly stepped upon something hollow. Sia-woon was left intrigued. He had now found the entrance to the Dimensions warehouse, but just as he was about to enter, a huge explosion suddenly occurred. And before our protagonist could even realize what was happening, he instinctively threw himself out of the window. Our hero had a hard time following what was happening, yet he did manage to escape, getting blown into the bushes at the last second. And just like that, Sia-woon fell into a bush near the mansion. This was rather confusing, as Sia-woon had made sure that no one was tracking him. Only then did he see something that caught his attention. Our hero recognized the mage in front of him as the one he saw in the lobby. The mage pointed out that his target truly acquired his impressive KDA by skill alone, as he had survived the explosion. And so, as he began to levitate, the elf promised that he would never forget the name Nam Sagwang. The young man urged the magician to stop overestimating himself and talking big. Nam Sagwang urged this flying enemy to start the fight already, as he had no time to waste. As the elf pointed out, the young man wouldn't stay arrogant for long. This one couldn't help but be entertained by the attitude of his enemy. Meanwhile, Jin Sia-woon was truly shocked to see that the all-powerful Nam Sagwang, who eliminated countless players, was actually pretty young. The mage found the young man to be rather arrogant and decided to humble him at once. Our weak hero had no choice but to watch the two titans fight among each other. At that moment, the one known as Escrow summoned lightning. He began channeling the thunderbolts in order to launch his attacks. And just like that, the young martial artist had no choice but to dodge the incoming attacks from above. The mage was sick of the martial artist constantly dodging his attacks and urged him to get offensive, just like he did with Elizabeth. It was the first time in his life that the talented young man had stumbled upon someone as powerful as the elf. The mage found himself greatly irritated by the young man who kept on dodging his attacks, and so he decided to resort to one of his special moves in order to end the fight quickly. Just like that, a lightning storm was unleashed upon the martial artist. Nam Sagwang sensed that a single one of these thunderbolts could take him out of the game. Even so, he remained calm and tried his best to dodge all incoming attacks. With that being said, the fighter jumped as high as possible. The mage was left startled, as, despite levitating high into the air, Nam Sagwang managed to close the distance between them. With that being said, the young martial artist braced himself to deliver the finishing blow. The mage affirmed that his strength alone couldn't possibly break his magic barrier, before slashing the young man in half using his staff. At first, it seemed like the infamous player had finally met his end, but only then did he vanish. The mage realized that he had just taken down an illusion. Just then, something intrigued the spectator. Sia-woon was amazed by the power of the elf that overwhelmed even the madman, and by how it was actually strong enough to stop a train. Escrow theorized that his opponent must have escaped beyond his reach, seeing how his detection item couldn't pick him up. And with that being said, the elf swore out loud that he would take the life of the young martial artist the next time they met. Meanwhile, the young man in question tried his best to run for his life. For their next encounter, Nam Sagwang was determined not to let himself get caught by surprise like today, and finally end the life of the mage. Yet the current priority of the young martial artist was to flee in order to rest. After the fight, the mage returned to the ground and began to quietly observe the area, yet he failed to spot our hero due to his magic cloak. Sidoin then theorized that neither the mage nor the powerful martial artist would return to the fight scene anytime soon. And just like that, he was able to locate what he was looking for. Now, in front of the entrance of the warehouse, Seo-woon began to fantasize that it was filled with important items and great treasures. From the looks of it, the stairs went down. Yet, seeing how no one seemed to have explored this warehouse yet, our hero decided to be the first to enter. The lamp that he had stolen from one of the houses turned out to be pretty useful, and so, upon reaching the end of the stairs, he hung it up. Seo-woon had now reached a food storage area. This left him particularly disappointed, as he had hoped to find some items, only to stumble upon food. His growing stomach, which had been filled with disgusting jerky until now, wasn't that disappointed. And so, after an hour, our hero finally finished his meal. The Korean young man would have liked to have some rice with this meal, yet he couldn't afford to be picky. With that, being satisfied, he took a look at the book of martial arts that he had acquired. Seeing how this book talked about an extinct martial art that was created by a ridiculed man who wanted to perfect the art of the fist, Seo-woon was rather disappointed. But just like the food, the survivor couldn't afford to be picky with his skills. After giving it some thought, the protagonist decided to consume the elixir before trying to test his new martial art. At first, the young man was hesitant, as his first experience with the circle stone was truly painful, but his obsession with strength made him drink the elixir at once. And just like that, the process began. Seo-woon could feel mana surging into his body, yet deemed it far too little compared to the energy that he had absorbed earlier. Due to the power of the elixir, Seo-woon lost the ability to move his body for 3 hours. And after a long wait, he finally gained control over his own flesh. The sniper, who had to wait for 3 hours, found himself exhausted. The one who hid in the forest for 7 days was grateful to have survived the fight between the mad martial artist and the great mage. And with that being said, our hero finally went to sleep. Just like that, the long day finally ended. It was now day 13. As soon as the morning dawned, our hero opened the trapdoor of the warehouse. He wasn't surprised to see himself next to the forbidden area and decided to check the kill log. Now only 10 survivors remained in the game. But at that moment, the young man noticed something intriguing. According to the system, the kind old man from before had taken his own life. Seo-woon theorized that his master, knowing that death doesn't exist in this realm, must have tried some insane training method. Our hero found this to be the only logical explanation and was disappointed by the fact that he only entered the top 10 due to the death of the immortal. His cloak was then caught in the restricted area. Seeing how the map was getting smaller, our hero decided to move at once before getting swallowed by the forbidden zone. And with that being said, the survivor resumed his course. Seo-woon was planning on evading fights as much as possible. For someone as weak as him, this would be the safest way to climb the leaderboard. When suddenly, our hero felt something incoming. Seo-woon dodged the all-powerful attack at the last second. This huge fireball had almost caught him off guard. Only one person came to his mind, seeing how he was attacked with magic. And as it turns out, what he feared was true. The human was now in front of Seo-woon, the great mage. The elf was somehow disappointed, as his item detection didn't locate the mad martial artist, but a nameless marksman. Seo-woon was at fault, as he had been so captivated by his newfound speed after absorbing energy that he forgot to be vigilant. The elf then asked the human if he knew about the whereabouts of Nam Sagwang. The mage stated that the marksman would be terminated if he failed to answer his question. But little did he know, his target was closer than anticipated. The mage explained to the young man that he would only spare his life if he told him the whereabouts of his target. But our nameless marksman affirmed that he couldn't possibly know the location of the mad martial artist. Only then did the young man see something shocking. Just as the elf was about to terminate him, something came at him from above. And just like that, the young man clashed with the magic barrier of the great mage. Escrow had been caught by surprise. Nam Sagwang, who had made a full recovery, pointed out how the mage must be running out of mana. Our protagonist was shocked to see the genius martial artist appear out of nowhere. With that being said, Nam Sagwang decided to terminate his target. And just like that, his punch shattered the magic barrier. Escrow mocked the strength of the martial artist and explained that such attacks couldn't possibly harm him. When all of a sudden, he started to bleed. Nam Sagwang asked the elf if he was familiar with Gangi. Among those arts was one named Sugeng, and one of the few people who had mastered it was shocked to see himself forced to resort to it. Nam Sagwang explained that Escrow should be honored to be the first player to suffer this technique. And just like that, the vocal cords of the one with the pointy ears were ripped off. Now unable to speak, the great mage wouldn't be able to chant his spells. According to the little beast, the elf could have easily been one of the strongest survivors in the game if he hadn't messed with him. It was a miracle for our weak protagonist to see Nam Sagwang ambush the mage, and so he decided to escape at once while the monsters were occupied with each other. Even so, Seo-woon was unable to avert his eyes from the fight. At that moment, the great mage was stabbed in the gut. It was safe to say that he was now at the complete mercy of the beyond martial artist. Watching the untouchable great mage get humiliated by the martial artist was a captivating spectacle. But upon seeing it, only one thought ran through the mind of our protagonist, numbing all other emotions. Jin Seo-woon began to wonder how much his own strength would grow if he absorbed the life energy of these two titans. His hunger and obsession with strength were now getting the best of him. Nam Sagwang began to mock the proud elf for being defeated like this and laugh at him for not even being able to speak his last words. Escrow, who was missing a throat, was truly unable to speak, yet he told the martial artist about his favorite disciple, Elizabeth, whom he had killed by telepathy. According to the mage, Elizabeth, who was his favorite student, was rejected by society and university alike because of her gender. But as the elf rambled on about his regrets, Nam Sagwang claimed that she must have been dressed like a man, as he didn't recall killing a girl. With that being said, everything was set in place to finally take down the martial artist. This one failed to understand what the man on the ring of death tried to say. But our protagonist immediately noticed something wrong. Seo-Woon looked up to the sky. An orange light lit up the blue above. From the heavens, a meteor descended on the map. According to the young martial artist, this should have been impossible, as he had taken the mage's ability to chant spells. So Escrow revealed how, as a great mage, he could sacrifice his mana and life force in order to cast Armageddon, the final spell. And just like that, the powerful martial artist began to run for his life, feeling that the elf would bring him along to the grave. Our puny hero did the same and regretted not fleeing the scene sooner. In the end, Escrow was happy to meet Elizabeth once again, and he wished for one more chance to see her once again. The great mage finally passed away, leaving behind a chest filled with his items. At that moment, the meteor finally hit the ground and caused great damage. An elf noticed the giant explosion from afar. According to that man, there was only one individual who had the power to use such destructive magic. After the explosion, our hero found himself in a critical state, as he didn't escape sooner due to his hunger for life force. Even so, he refused to meet his demise. Seo-Woon now used the healing scrolls that he had accumulated in order to nurse himself back to health. This time, he managed to escape the near claws of death due to an elixir he had consumed. Seeing how the wounds were gone but the pain lingered, the marksman decided to use more healing scrolls. And after using a bunch, he finally regained the ability to breathe normally. This disaster had milked the protagonist dry of his healing items. Seo-Woon then decided to take a look at the kill log. Due to the last spell of the late great mage, our hero would now be unable to absorb his life energy. Yet to his shock, Nam Sagwang seemed to have survived, as his name wasn't mentioned in the kill log. Only then did his ears pick up someone begging for help. Seo-Woon quietly went to check the source of these cries, and just like that, he stumbled upon the source. Our weak hero was shocked by what his eyes were seeing. The powerful martial artist was near death and unable to use a healing scroll on his own. Even Nam Sagwang couldn't dodge the meteor summoned by the great mage, as he had now lost both of his arms, making him unable to use healing scrolls. At that moment, the young man noticed someone nearby and begged him to use the scroll for him, only for this person to recognize him as Nam Sagwang. Seeing how he had been uncovered as the strongest player, the martial artist was left horrified. Seo-Woon explained that he was curious about the items that made Nam Sagwang the strongest, and that it was a surprise to see him in such a pathetic state. The martial artist then promised the protagonist to make him the winner of the game in exchange for help, and tried to persuade him that his help was crucial. Yet, the survivor could only focus on the items of the martial artist, as well as his life force, as he was certain that it would make him the game's great champion, while Nam Sagwang claimed that most of his loot didn't come from the game. Jin Seo-Woon then introduced himself to the one that he was about to take out. In the end, Nam Sagwang admitted defeat, but with his last breath, he swore that he would never forget the name of the one who had wronged him. And just like that, the strongest player in the game was stabbed in the head. Our hero felt weird, as he had just slain someone who looked quite young. At that moment, the process began to happen. His body started to drink in the life energy. The marksman was completely amazed by how much there was. Nam Sagwang must have been loaded with life energy, as the protagonist found himself filled with incredible chi. At that moment, the kill log was updated. All were notified that only 8 survivors remained in the game, and that Nam Sagwang had met his end at the hands of Jin Seo-Woon. The archer quickly realized that since the cat was now gone, the mice would finally come out to play. Upon absorbing the insane amount of life energy, Seo-Woon couldn't help but think of himself as invincible. Our hero then noticed the chest of his latest victim nearby. Seeing how much internal energy he had received, the protagonist was certain that the chest contained sweet loot, and upon opening it, he wasn't disappointed at all. In fact, our hero found himself quite pleased. Seo-Woon had acquired a bunch of rings that increased his agility, strength, stamina, as well as his magic resistance. With that, you couldn't help but find the mad martial artist quite the liar, as he claimed that he didn't use gear despite having found all of these great rings. At that moment, the protagonist began to feel different, so he immediately summoned his status window. Seo-Woon was happy to see that all of his stats had grown a lot, with magic resistance even reaching 90. And with that, our hero was now certain that he would become the champion of the game. The chest also contained numerous martial arts books that the protagonist couldn't learn, as there must be a condition to meet before doing so. At that moment, something caught the attention of the now powerful marksman. It came to his attention that an enemy was now getting closer. But just then, someone unleashed a fire spell upon him. Jin Seo-Woon was hit head-on with a powerful fire blast. The spellcaster criticized him for dropping his guard while collecting items. He even claimed that Seo-Woon must be really lucky, as someone who would fall for such a surprise attack had a very low chance of taking out Nam Sagwang. But to the mage's utmost shock, his target remained standing even after getting hit by his flames. Due to his 90 points of magic resistance, the marksman became so strong that such spells weren't even able to scratch him any longer. And with that being said, he started to make his move. Now being approached at walking speed, the mage began to panic and threaten to unleash an even more powerful spell. With that, the mage began to channel his magic in order to unleash a powerful attack. Yet, according to our protagonist, this would be pointless. And just like that, the marksman kept on walking even after taking a huge explosion of fire. Now came the time to launch the counterattack. Seo-Woon decided to use his first martial art. In order to strike the opponent, he went with his straight suffering fist. The strike was so strong that the opponent started to cough blood before getting blasted into a nearby tree. Upon seeing how much his firepower had increased, the shocked young man understood that the output strength of martial arts greatly relied on internal energy. And with that being said, and just from a single strike, the number of survivors was lowered by 1. As he absorbed the energy of his latest victim, Seo-won began to think of how his magic resistance of 90 must be protecting him from intermediate spells. Seeing how the genius martial artist was eliminated, all the remaining survivors would now show themselves. With that, it didn't take our hero long to realize that he had a hard night ahead of him. And with that being said, he began to move again. With his new upgrades, Jin Seo-won had acquired a speed similar to the old man to whom he owed a huge debt of gratitude. After being on the move for 60 minutes, our hero stopped for a brief moment in order to scout the area. When he suddenly heard someone urging him to come out, Seo-won was shocked to see that there was a player who would actually scream like that in the middle of the wild. The loudmouth with a giant sword wanted the protagonist to prove his bravery by showing himself. The tall muscle monster screamed that all the other contenders were surely hiding from him, when suddenly something came flying at him. The swordsman quickly noticed the incoming projectile, and so he used his giant sword in order to protect himself from the arrow. And so, while the muscle monster was infuriated by what he considered to be a cowardly move, Seo-won grew curious. He began to wonder about the archer that fired the arrow. According to the swordsman, there was only one marksman that could shoot an arrow after infusing it with an incredibly large amount of aura. The marksman in question bears the name of Jurokwana. The man was intrigued to see that the swordsman knew about him. This made the muscle monster reveal to Jurokwana that he and the rest of the mercenaries considered him a legendary divine archer. The bodybuilder then offered the archer to team up in order to win the competition, starting by eliminating Jin Seo-won. With that, the one with pointy ears landed on the ground. The mercenary immediately introduced himself as Stanko. He then promised the archer that he would be pleased with him, as he was quite famous in his guild. The elf responded with a single word. Stanko couldn't help but find the so-called divine archer to be rather stupid. Jurokwana was then left quite intrigued, as he seemed to have miscalculated his timing. The mercenary then affirmed that it was a lethal mistake for a marksman to close the distance. It didn't take Stanko long to break his alliance with the legendary archer and betray him. And with that being said, he swung his blade in order to take out the archer. But little did he know something was flying towards him at high speed. Just like that, an arrow from behind penetrated the skull of the giant mercenary. Jurokwana found it rather laughable that Stanko would think that he would actually agree to team up with him. The one that lost a lot of time then decided to focus on locating his top priority, which was our protagonist. The same protagonist who rushed to steal the vitality of the dropped chest, as only 6 people remained in the game. He then became quite annoyed that the energy wasn't getting absorbed any faster. At that moment, the marksman suddenly turned around. Seo-won froze in place. As the gaze of the enemy suddenly became fixated, our hero began to panic, thinking that the elf managed to spot him despite his invisible cloak. He started to think that the enemy might have some sort of hidden ability and blamed himself for carelessly rushing to absorb the life energy without thinking about it. In the end, Jurokwana decided not to bother with the loot of Stanko, seeing how weak he was. And so, thinking that the items inside the chest would just be dead weight, the legendary archer finally took his leave. This relieved Seo-won, who was on edge, and he fell to the ground. He was surprised by how good the instincts of the archer were. The name of this man was now engraved in the memory of the protagonist. Jin Seo-won had now found the next big bad that he would have to face. Shortly after, the map began to shrink even faster. The protagonist noticed this change. Despite the fact that there were 87 days left, Seo-won assumed that since most players had now been eliminated, the shrinking rate must have increased. Only then did he stumble upon something tricky. Our hero was now in front of a wide open area. All players would immediately know his location if he happened to get into a fight in this tall grass. Suddenly, someone attacked. The protagonist turned in retreat, and upon seeing the green blades rushing towards him, the invisible man was left shocked. So, as the attack descended on the ground, Seo-won managed to dodge all of the incoming strikes. It was rather shocking to see someone perfectly aiming at him, seeing how his cloak should make him undetectable. And just like that, the enemy attacked him once again. Seeing how the projectiles were now more numerous than before, Seo-won realized that his only option was to fight them head-on. And so, the invisible man took a fighting stance. Seo-won would now try to have faith in his internal energy, as it was all or nothing at this point. With that being said, he used his extreme trade punch. The attack of his fist created a powerful shockwave that shattered all attacks upon impact. Our hero just realized how much he had underestimated his strength. Just like that, he jumped high into the air. His priority was now to locate the one who had attacked him. At that moment, something caught the eyes of our invisible man. The enemy had finally been spotted. The same man that was shocked to see that the attack that he had invested all of his might into was countered by a single punch. At that moment, something unexpected happened. Someone was stabbed, and blood splattered everywhere. The mage was shocked to see that someone had penetrated him from behind. His killer blamed him for not saving some mana in order to cast a shield or even a detection spell. This discreet figure affirmed that stealth was his specialty, seeing as he was an assassin. And just like that, another player went down, decreasing the number of survivors to 5. At that moment, our hero landed on the ground. The assassin immediately recognized him. Jin Seo-won had now become a celebrity, seeing as he was the one who had slain Nam Sagwang. It was then explained to him that, for this reason, all other players must be after him. The assassin then explained that he had never failed to take down a target before. With that being said, each of the survivors made his move. The marksman and the assassin were now charging at each other. Who's this? But the one with the blades claimed his opponent to be lacking speed. And just like that, the assassin was the first one to draw first blood. The arm of our protagonist was now covered in injuries. Woon, who realized that his opponent was tough, was able to survive the slashes as he had covered himself in a layer of inner energy. The assassin then explained that his victory was certain, as he was always successful when taking down targets in the dark. Our hero was quite annoyed, as it was his first time going up against an assassin. But upon realizing that the powers of the opponent were related to darkness, he suddenly had an idea. With that being said, the assassin decided to put an end to the fight. He started to use one of his skills. The assassin had suddenly disappeared. He then quickly closed the distance between him and his target, before landing a double slash that should have cut our hero into two pieces. At that moment, Woon, who made the enemy attack his afterimage, commanded his stealth technique. Yet the skill of the assassin couldn't possibly match the cloak of stealth of our protagonist. After grabbing the opponent by the arms, Woon, who was now behind his target, explained that he had located him by sensing his inner energy. He then urged the enemy to keep on talking high and mighty. Before breaking both of his arms, the assassin began to beg for his life and promised, in exchange, to help our hero fight the other contestants. But before the man could even have a chance to finish his sentence, Woon broke his skeleton, dealing the finishing blow. Now only 4 survivors were left in the game, as the one named Tamarin had met his end at the hands of the protagonist. The martial artist then successfully absorbed the energies of the assassin, as well as the mage, and rushed to loot their chests. Yet while searching through the chest of Tamarin, Woon found a rather unexpected book. This skill book would allow him to summon a number of clones of himself proportional to his inner energy. If the assassin knew how to wield inner energy, he would have been quite the problem with this book in his hands. As for the other chest, it contained Carmen's Eye, which can locate even the stealthiest of targets, but the hero couldn't learn it as his circle was too low. And so, as the protagonist began to realize that his cloak of invisibility wasn't invincible after all, something came flying at him from above. Woon instinctively tilted his head in order to avoid the incoming projectile that would have pierced his skull. He was intrigued to see an arrow in front of him. It didn't take our hero long to realize the identity of the one who had fired it. Suddenly, a giant object came flying at the protagonist. This was the first time that Woon had seen such a spell, and he was certain that the archer wasn't its caster. Seeing how he couldn't evade the incoming spell, our hero had no choice but to face it head-on, and thus, the heavy rock was hit with an extremely straight punch. After much effort, and after powering a lot of mana into his fist, the young man was finally able to shatter the giant rock. It didn't take him long to understand that he was currently being jumped by 2 players. At that moment, someone praised the protagonist for his strength. Woon then escaped the flash-like frost by a hair. He then proceeded to distance himself from the enemy. As it turns out, our hero now had to fight 3 enemies at once. The 3 of them had gathered to take him out. Now in front of Senturk, King of Kursan, Carrion, the right hand of the Demon King, as well as Urokwana, the Divine Archer, our poor protagonist, who doesn't even have a cool title, found himself in quite the pickle. The 3 men affirmed to the young one that they shall end his run. Now in front of a team united against him, the best choice would have been to create a conflict between them, which was impossible as they were strangers to him. At that moment, the Dark Mage went to greet the King of Kursan. Senturk was disgusted that a black magician would address him, so the mage apologized and reminded him that rank doesn't exist in this place. Seeing how the magician was now proposing to the king to team up, he realized that the 3 opponents just happened to arrive at the same time. With that being said, they decided to free our hero from his invisibility power. At that moment, a dark mage launched his spell. A powerful light suddenly appeared. It was so strong that it had almost bound the protagonist. The right hand of the Demon King had made it so there was no darkness for the young man to use as a hiding spot. This was rather alarming, as the cloak of invisibility could only make its wearer disappear by blending him with the nearby darkness. The mage explained that he wanted to express his gratitude to Nam Sagwang, who had taken out his enemy, the Great Mage. And despite being disappointed that he couldn't thank him in person, the Dark Mage was determined to slaughter the boy in the name of his lord. With that being said, he activated his Chaos Blade, Dark Blade Storm. Mages were usually weak when it comes to close combat, but approaching this one would be rather difficult, as his huge side was in the way. So our hero decided to charge at him regardless. Carrion claimed the young martial artist to be foolish, as he then proceeded to attack him with his spell. Wu needed to use his inner energy in order to shield himself from the damage as much as possible in order to get close and take down the mage. Our hero kept on suffering cut after cut. His cloak was now damaged and would only regain its power upon being repaired. This spell had placed him in a tough situation, as both his cloak and his energy shield were now getting destroyed. The Dark Mage was shocked to see that the young man, now suffering his spell, hadn't been turned to meat cubes by now. But from behind the countless slashes, the Severing Fist was suddenly activated. Only then did he step forward. Woon, who was covered in his own blood, charged at his opponent with a straight-cut fist. But the mage affirmed that the efforts of the young one were pointless as he used Chaos, Dead Man Hands, Touch of the Dead. Suddenly, the hands of corpses began to rise from the ground. The hands were many and extended high. This was the first time that our hero had found himself against an enemy so skilled. At that moment, he used his Spirit Illusion steps, and just like that, our hero managed to escape. The right hand of the Demon King was shocked to see that the martial artist he was against had the power to create illusions. At that moment, Woon closed the distance and braced himself to deal the finishing blow. Only then did the third party decide to intervene. The thrust of the rapier went through the dark mage and pierced the young man. The betrayed one criticized the king for being vulgar enough to stab someone in the back. Centric revealed that the end justified the means and that he never considered the dark mage an ally in the first place. Even so, he thanked him for using his last breath in order to eliminate the annoying protagonist. With that being said, the king and the divine archer were now face to face. Centric explained that it was rather weird to see himself taking Jirokwana, who was an annoyance to his army, in a one-on-one fight. So the archer revealed to the royal that they weren't alone just yet. And before the one with the mustache could even realize what was happening, our protagonist punched him with extreme force in the skull. The blow was so powerful that it even blew a piece of the man's armor as it twisted his body. Just like that, the swordsman was blasted into a nearby mountain. Seo-won then tried to catch his breath. Now face to face with our hero, Jirokwana explained that he must have dodged the king's attack by using an illusion. With that being said, Seo-won urged him to stop talking and just get it on with the final fight. Jirokwana found it funny that everyone was in a rush and clarified to the young man that he still had a battle to finish. The king, who was still alive, found it rather annoying to be hit with a surprise attack. The monarch then praised the young man for escaping his blade and packing enough strength to shatter his fine armor. For some reason, our guy ripped off his shirt before asking his opponents if they would like to jump him or fight individually. Centric decided to stop holding back, and just like that, the giant man began to make his move. The earthling was shocked by the speed this one was demonstrating. In the blink of an eye, the rapier pierced the arm of our protagonist. Centric was confident that he was the fastest man in the game and explained that he had paralyzed the left hand of our hero, making him unable to use his technique. Seo-won began to panic as his opponent, who seemed like a muscle beast, turned out to be a cardio monster that he couldn't even track using his inner energy. Even so, the young man refused to lose while so close to the top, and thus, he broke the enemy's rapier by using the internal energy that he had accumulated. The king was shocked to see that his weapon had been broken. The protagonist then quickly grabbed the shard of the sword that was left in his arm. He then used his throwing skill to launch it at high speed, but the king managed to evade death at the last second. Even so, the one with the mustache was particularly annoyed, seeing how his face had been wounded. Seo-won then resorted to a healing scroll. The king found himself unable to overlook the determination of his opponent. For that reason, he used his aura blade from the sword in order to create a new weapon. Centric began to upload the skills of his young opponent, seeing how he had pushed him to use his aura blade. The arm of Jin Seo-won had been fully healed. With that being said, our hero resorted to his spirit illusion steps. He used all of his power in order to create clones of himself. The swordsman found the tricks of the martial artist to be rather annoying. Both Jin Seo-won and the king of Kursan were filled with a burning desire to achieve victory. Meanwhile, the third survivor watching from afar urged them to finish their fight already. The divine archer was starting to get bored while waiting for one of the two to win and come challenge him. The protagonist decided to not hold anything back against the king, the same king that asked him to stop running his mouth and start running his hands. Centric had to find a way to take down the protagonist in 2 minutes, as this was the duration of his blade. The young man realized that his end was near, seeing how his internal energy was almost emptied out. And with that being said, the giant speedster, as well as his shadow clone using opponent, charged at each other. The king tried to kill one of them with his rapier, only for the other to hit him in the back. The blonde one immediately struck the one who hit him from behind. But to his shock, he felt as if there was nothing on the other end of his blade, seeing how it was a clone. Centric was determined to take down all illusions as well as their creator, when all of a sudden, he got punched in the face. One of the martial artists managed to land a sneaky hit on him once again. Seeing how this one had impact, he assumed that he was the real Seo-won. Our hero then asked his opponent about his opinion regarding the punch. He also asked him to stop looking for the real him. According to the martial artist, his clones possessed the same firepower as him, making them almost identical to the real deal. At that moment, 2 of them descended upon the swordsman with a flying kick that he dodged at the last instant. The one with the mustache resorted to his piercing aura. This allowed him to slash the 2 clones with a single attack. Just like that, the copies were easily defeated. According to Centric, the copies were all one tap. Only 5 Seo-wons remained. The king was now in a tough spot, as his aura blade would dissolve after 60 seconds. Meanwhile, the archer watched the fight with great interest. It was a surprise for him to see the king having such a hard time. At that moment, the king asked him for help and promised a huge reward in return once they returned to the realm. But the archer didn't even have enough time to warn the king, as our hero suddenly appeared right in front of him. He tried to take him out with a thrust, only for the martial artist to dodge. Seo-won then attacked with his severing fist. The attack was quite powerful, and yet, the swordsman used the guard of his rapier in order to shield himself at the last minute. This was rather annoying for our hero. Centric then rushed to stab the one in front of him, thinking that it was the main body. And just like that, the blood of the penetrated clone splattered everywhere. And so, now with a hole in his chest, the clone was defeated. The king was shocked that he had targeted a fake once again. This made him feel like he was being laughed at. Centric was unable to stand this humiliation. At that moment, the enraged swordsman screamed that he didn't care about this game any longer, and that his only wish was to butcher Jin Seo-won. This anger made the elf compare the king to the Emperor of Madness. The swordsman then dared the martial artist to try and dodge his attack. He then executed a powerful thrust that took out 2 copies at once. With that, the number of his opponents decreased once again. Seeing how only 2 martial artists were left, he had a 50% chance of hitting the real one on his first strike. And just like that, the 2 of them charged at the king. The quick swordsman managed to evade the first powerful punch coming at him, yet failed to dodge the second one that went through his gut. Only then did Centric realize that the attack had an impact, and thus, he stabbed the one that had just punched him in the head. Then again, seeing how easily the blade went through this one, it was safe to assume that he was a copy as well. Seeing how only one martial artist remained, the king claimed that he must be the real Seo-won. Now the fight was one-on-one. Centric stated that he would end the fight with his next attack. Yet our protagonist didn't even bother to respond. And just like that, the two fighters charged at each other. Seo-won quickly blocked the arm of the enemy with his kick. Centric commended his young opponent, as he was pretty skilled in hand-to-hand combat. At that moment, he decided to deal the finishing blow by resorting to Aura Blade Lightning Storm. With that, a powerful burst of light emerged from the broken rapier. The energy was so strong and powerful that it immediately blew away the leg of our hero. Seo-won screamed in pain, as his opponent smiled in satisfaction. And just like that, our hero fell to the ground while screaming in agony. Seo-won tried to bargain for his life, claiming that he would help the king deal with the archer, only to be then stabbed in the gut. The fight was finally over, and the power of Aura Blade had finally dissipated. The king managed to end the fight within the 2-minute duration of his skill. Centric admitted that he would have been utterly defeated if the fight had been dragged out any longer. Only then did he realize that something was wrong. The king couldn't believe it. He was left horrified that upon stabbing, he felt no impact upon hitting his opponent. Suddenly, the one with the mustache was grabbed by the head. At that very instant, Seo-won crushed the skull of the king without a speck of hesitation. He admitted that he would have lost if it wasn't for his clones that had tired his opponent. The divine archer admitted being surprised by the victory of the earthling. Jurokana expressed gratitude towards our protagonist for killing the annoying king. He then pointed out how the mighty Centric, who had placed his very soul in this fight for the sake of victory, was outsmarted by our young martial artist, who resorted to all of his might as well. That same young martial artist that he was now bracing himself to terminate. And just like that, the divine archer attacked in order to claim his victory. In front of this, the young man was left horrified. Seo-won consumed a great amount of internal energy after his last kill, despite it not being as great as the one he had gotten from Nam Sagwang. Now the protagonist had been refilled. He had acquired the necessary energy to face the archer. Only then did he notice something alarming. Seo-won quickly dodged the arrow coming his way. With that being said, he immediately used his clone technique. An army of martial artists then quickly charged at the divine archer. The elf found this technique to be quite annoying, and yet he couldn't help but let out a smirk. The archer immediately fired one of his arrows that hit one of the Seo-wons in the leg. This was truly shocking. Just like that, the main body began to fall as all of the clones began to disappear. The archer then joined him on the ground. Jurokana then explained that he needed to immobilize our hero. Just like that, he shot him in the right hand, followed by the left. Our annoyed hero demanded to know how the one with pointy ears was able to distinguish him from his clones. The divine archer simply smiled and explained that he simply relied on his instincts. And while the human was confused, the martial artist pointed out how much he must have struggled in order to make it this far. Jurokana expressed his respect towards the protagonist, who couldn't care less, as he just urged him to end the fight. And with that being said, the battle finally ended. Jin Seo-won had been slain, shot in the head with an arrow. As the marksman began to wonder if the fight was truly over, the last chest finally made its appearance. The battle of this game called Claude had truly ended. Our defeated young man blamed himself for having been too careless. Despite having consumed a huge amount of mana, the one who ended in second place was somehow displeased. To his shock, the system informed him that he had earned the right to participate in the second game. As the items that he had gained throughout the match appeared, the young man was rewarded 140 reward coins. The numerous objects our hero had picked up each had a different price. The system informed him that he was free to buy any item that he liked with the money that he was given. Yet, to the shock of our protagonist, his cloning technique cost a whopping 130 coins, which he claimed to be scandalous. The system then informed him that, as one of the 5 finalists, he was able to spin a wheel in order to get items for free. Seeing how he was the second place of the match, Jin Seo-won could perform 2 spins, making him pray that he would get the expensive cloak of invisibility or cloning. Upon learning this, the martial artist was found rather happy, as this could potentially offer him a great advantage. With that being said, he began with his first spin. His eyes were fixated on the roulette. At that moment, he decided to stop the spin. Seo-won found himself on his toes, waiting to see what he had gotten. The prize of our protagonist turned out to be the escrow's necklace. This left him quite frustrated, as the free roulette only gave him the cheapest item that he could buy. Yet he decided to remain hopeful, seeing how he had a second chance. With that, he began praying to every deity he could think of for good luck, before asking the wheel to stop. In the end, as his eyes were fixated on the screen, the heart of the protagonist began pounding heavily, eagerly waiting for the result. And in the end, he obtained his spirit illusion steps. This greatly overjoyed our hero. In the end, he was able to get the most expensive item in the shop for free. With that being said, the system decided to give the player the items that he had won. Now came the time to start shopping for the items that he had in the game. Getting the most expensive object for free saved the player a ton of money, and after wasting enough time in this space, he bought what he needed and finished his shopping. With that, everything was completed as the system wished the player good luck on the second game. The teleportation then began. Our hero found himself in a new location. In fact, he had returned to the exact same spot he had disappeared from. Only then did he notice something in the palm of his hand. This was the ring of subspace that he had acquired from the game. There was no doubt about it. The odd experience that he went through was certainly real. With that being said, the protagonist picked up his backpack and went on his way. With the end of the first game, all seemed to have returned to the way it was. Yet in reality, this was the start of a new massive chapter in the life of the young man. Jin Seo-woon had now no reason to worry about TOEIC anymore. He hadn't misheard. There was truly a second match in the near future. Jin Seo-woon decided to return home in order to prepare for it, as despite finishing second in his first game, which was rather acceptable, our hero wanted to aim for the #1 spot. He returned to his little apartment that his parents found him near his university, as his original plan stipulated that he was going to prepare himself for college. Yet now all of his focus had been shifted, as he was now readying himself for the second game. Seo-woon didn't want to play his second match as a weak survivor like last time, but as a dominating hunter. Our hero could feel himself empty, as his internal energy had been drained out by the battle. Seeing how murder was still illegal in Korea, he had no choice but to resort to Chugki in order to restore a portion of his internal energy. Back then, the master explained to the pupil that he was now able to use Chugki, which he would master with practice, to restore his energy, even if absorption was more effective. Hearing this, the young man asked the old one if he could truly reach his level by training. The master couldn't help but laugh at the guts of his student, as he could actually get himself killed while walking in his footsteps. But in the end, there was no way to know if Jin Seo-woon was a weak normie, or a powerful potential waiting to be awakened. After 4 hours of continuous meditation, our protagonist was only able to gather a very small amount of energy. In the end, he couldn't take it any longer. Real life was far too different from the game, as it cruelly lacked inner energy. Seo-woon decided to stop wasting his time and organize the loot that he had brought with him. He regretted not having been able to acquire a martial art better than this. 3-0. Coin Book of Iron Free Fist. Our hero began fearing that in the real world, he would have to properly learn the martial art, making his road to power cruelly longer. Only then was he met with a pleasant surprise. As it turns out, the system of the game was operational on Earth, and thus, he quickly used it in order to absorb the martial art. Seo-woon put it to the test with a punch, followed by a quick kick. His hits weren't as strong as back in the game, seeing how his inner energy reserves were practically empty. The protagonist then decided to check the rest of the items. One of them was the necklace that he had won by spinning the wheel. After a small test, he realized that its description wasn't lying and that the necklace was pure gold. Seo-woon was then left quite shocked as he realized that this one-coin item could amount to 10 million won, as, in fact, getting his hands on 10 of these necklaces could secure him an entire fortune. All items in the game, even the cheapest ones, could be sold at a heavy price on Earth. One of them was this elixir that ensures its user 1 year of life without any disease. Seo-woon began to speculate that this item could be sold at a larger price to sick millionaires who had lost all hope. He was now certain that this game was his chance to turn his life around. Only then did the hungry protagonist realize that he had spent the entire game eating jerkies, with his hunger being suppressed while consuming inner energy, and so he decided to go grab himself a bite. Shortly after, at Grandma's restaurant, our hero ordered the one-set meal. This was the monthly 5,001 luxury that our hero had missed the most while in the game. Tears started to roll down Seo-woon's eyes as he finally got to enjoy the taste of white rice once again. The old owner began to question his behavior and urged him to stop crying, seeing how he was a man. Seo-woon claimed that he was just submerged in the pras flavor, while the old lady urged him to finish his plate and ask her for a second if needed. Just like he had predicted, the time in the game was different from the time spent in the real world. Upon finishing his meal, the old lady asked the young protagonist to pay and come again. Seo-woon wanted to accumulate energy before the next match, despite not knowing when it would start. Only then did he recall the very specific item that he came back with. After putting on the 2-0 coin ring of strength, the protagonist began to wonder if it would be the same as in the game. And just like that, he immediately felt the change. Seo-woon got into position and jumped a horrifyingly high height. It was as if his body had turned into pure power. Despite being so high in the air, Seo-woon managed to easily stick the landing. He began to pray that no one had spotted or recorded him in order to avoid trouble. Yet, seeing how the stats offered by the ring here were the same as those in the game, the young man began to think. Once home, he began to think of the item that he wanted to save for after he had acquired inner energy. But after careful consideration, he decided to use it at once. This was the most expensive item that he had gotten, the 5-0 coin elixir of inner sight. Back in the game, this elixir immobilized the body of the boy for 3 hours and made every cell in it boil. Even then, he drank it without hesitation. The effects immediately kicked in. Power quickly began to overwhelm the body of the protagonist. And just like that, the empty bottle fell to the ground. After 3 hours, someone reported the wall to be hot. Seeing how the complainant claimed that even the doorknob was boiling hot, he was advised to call 911 instead of the police. As the old lady explained to the officers that this didn't feel like a fire, they claimed that this must be a boiler issue. The neighbor didn't buy it and was certain that there was something sketchy behind this heat. The officer went to grab the doorknob in order to enter, but to his shock, his hand was suddenly burned. With that, the police asked the civilians they had received a complaint about to open the door. The officers stated that they were here to provide assistance. Only then was the door opened. After the shocking sight, the officer revealed to the young man that they were here for a complaint regarding a fire. Seo-woon claimed that he had a fever. He explained that he had turned up the boiler to a high temperature and asked why it wasn't the fire department at his door if they suspected a fire. The officers stated that they were just doing their job and offered to call an ambulance for the protagonist, who claimed that he would get better on his own. With that being said, the officers made their way out while asking the neighbor not to bother them over trivial matters. Now alone, our protagonist quickly closed the door behind him. Jin Seo-woon, who went through incredible agonies due to the elixir, would have almost lost his life if it wasn't for the supreme blanket technique. This made him realize that all items acquired in the game weren't totally safe in the real world, yet he could feel that something had changed, and so he decided to put his strength to the test. With just a single palm, the exhausted young man was able to shatter his faraway chair. After this unexpected result, Seo-woon decided to use the money that he would get from the items in order to get himself a new chair. The next day, at an outdoor gym, our hero, who was here to work out in order to improve his martial arts, found the place to be way too crowded to his taste at this time of the day. And thus, he began wondering if he should only work out at night. Only then did he notice something intriguing. Seo-woon spotted some young thugs from the high school at the foot of the mountain, with one of them being a girl asking a boy if the boss truly wanted to see her. And yet, as they were conversing, someone told them that smoking was forbidden in this place. As the old man called out, the students were smoking. One of them urged him to leave him alone, as not even his parents cared about his misdeeds. At that moment, the old man stated that the reminder must have been a mistake, leaving the young thug incredibly enraged. Seo-woon suddenly felt uneasy. At that moment, the young man threatened to strike the old one, seeing how foul his mouth was, when suddenly, he was kicked in the face. With a single strike, the high schooler was sent flying before slamming into a nearby trash can. The grown man who just struck a minor explained to him that he had no right to be rude to the elderly. Everyone was left shocked by what just happened. Suddenly, someone approached our hero. This individual pointed out that this was their first time meeting. The high schooler, who was easily over 6 feet tall, asked the puny one if he had a death wish. With that, Jin Seo-woon quickly understood that he had gotten himself into quite the pickle. The tall one demanded an explanation. He wanted to know if our protagonist had truly hit his younger brother. Seo-woon explained that the young one was at fault, as he had attacked an elder, before pointing out how high school students smoke, especially in public. But just as our hero claimed that the tall one should properly educate his younger brother, he found himself instinctively dodging something. The high schooler tried to punch him. Seo-woon decided to reply with one of his powerful moves. And just like that, the minor was punched with great strength. Seo-woon began to panic, as he might have hit him a little too hard. Only then did he realize something intriguing. As a switchblade was suddenly pulled out of nowhere, the tall thug, with his weapon in hand, was determined to teach our hero a lesson. This made him realize that both brothers were equally stupid and alike. Seo-woon then fought the C-2000 knife with great ease. This fight made it extremely clear for the player that he was now on a different level from the rest of the normies. With that, he executed his sweep kick in order to knock the young man off his feet. Seo-woon decided to control himself and only hit with half of his strength. Even so, 50% of the 10,000 palm technique still seemed too much, as the bones of the high schoolers were now surely broken. After all, he had slammed at high speed into a tree. Seo-woon was once left startled as all began to record the event. He realized that he had messed up by putting in too much strength, and so he began to claim that his opponent was an actor and some sort of convincing stuntman. With that being said, the grown man advised the minor to stop smoking and never carry switchblades with him ever again, as it could cause them problems. And so, after beating up 2 high schoolers to near death, our mighty protagonist made a run for it. He started regretting using his power on a regular human. Seo-woon would ruin his own life if he accidentally killed someone. Even if his current skills were quickly learned due to the game system, only time would allow our hero to master them. And with that being said, the protagonist ran away. Sometime later, 30 days after his encounter with the high schoolers, Seo-woon kept practicing meditation regularly. Only then was he interrupted by a certain sound. The phone of our hero was ringing. His mom was calling to check up on him. The lady revealed how she was worried about her son, who hadn't contacted her in a while. She then asked him how he was doing at his new university. Seo-woon lied by claiming that everything was all right, as he didn't have the guts to tell his mother that he dumped the books for the sake of martial arts. The young man then asked about his father, and to his shock, it turned out that the man had gotten into a car crash. Seo-woon was left horrified, as according to his mother, his father, who was making a delivery, was brutally hit by a car that failed to stop at a red light. The woman began to cry as they couldn't rely on insurance, despite the surgery being extremely expensive. She felt ashamed to ask her son, who she wasn't able to send much, for the rest of the money she had previously sent him. Seo-woon immediately asked about the cost of the surgery as he reached out to his subspace. As it turns out, it cost 2 million won. And so, as the protagonist claimed that he might have found a way out of the problem, his mom apologized for troubling him. Seo-woon quickly ended the call and went on his way. The parents of our hero spent most of their lives going from one rented place to the other. As he got older, his father, who worked tirelessly, began to get smaller and smaller pay. He spent his entire life rotating from one job to another. Seo-woon couldn't help but cry as he realized that he was but a hopeless burden on the hands of his already struggling parents. Yet now, the time to pay them back finally arrived. With that, our hero entered the store and presented the escrow necklace for sale. As the shopkeeper recognized the item as foreign, he quickly claimed that it was in his family for a long time. She pointed out that the item really seemed ancient as Seo-woon asked about its estimated value. As the lady explained that this couldn't be considered a simple piece of gold, Seo-woon explained that he had no choice but to sell it quickly for the surgery of his father. The martial artist now had no choice but to sell the item. Later on, after finishing the sale, the young man finally exited the store. Since the value of gold has recently increased, Seo-woon would be able to afford the surgery of his father as well as a decent lifestyle. The smile of the shopkeeper made him realize that he had sold the necklace for cheap, yet he had no choice but to quickly make money. And thus, he decided to think of a way to safely sell his items for the future. His current priority was to send the money to his mother. Upon receiving it, the mother, who was called by her son, was baffled by the huge amount that he had sent. She feared that the protagonist had taken out a loan. The hero explained that this would have been impossible, as he was jobless, and claimed that the money was something that he had saved from his part-time jobs. With that, he ended the call by stating to his mother that he couldn't pay them a visit at the hospital. Later on, while in the bedroom, Si-woon was left alone to think. Only then was he inspired by a conversation that he overheard. Two high schoolers criticized a video and claimed it to be full of CGI and special effects, despite looking like it had been taken in secret. In it, an individual chanted magic words. Upon hearing them, our hero was left quite shocked. The normal person wouldn't think much of this, but as a player, he knew very well that those were the spells from the game. This was a real shock for him, as it turns out that he wasn't the only Korean to have entered a match. According to the high schoolers, this video was on an endless loop of deletes and uploads, which was rather odd. Jin Seo-woon had never thought of how the appearance of other players on Earth would impact his life. Meanwhile, someone was taking an important phone call, and the man promised to correct his mistake on the internet at all costs. The boss apologized and promised to solve the problem. With that being said, the call was finally ended. He then asked one of his support for a report about the Korean player in the videos, but as soon as he heard that it was impossible to control the number of players, the boss was quickly angered by this. He threw the heavy object at the head of his subordinate, furious by the fact that random people were acquiring abilities unlike their organization. With that, the boss ordered his subordinates to go catch all players that were hungry for views on the internet. He then demanded his subordinates stop the bleeding of the man so that he wouldn't sully his carpet. And so, while one of them was using his powers to heal his friend, the boss criticized them for their weakness and began to complain about the annoying privers. With that being said, the boss ordered all of his men to get moving at once. The heat of the summer finally ended, and the cold weather of the night finally appeared. 2 months had already passed since he had returned to Earth, and our hero had never skipped one of his training sessions at night. He had gained a decent amount of internal energy and learned how to master it to a certain degree. Seo-woon suddenly decided to jump while thinking about the biggest issue. With that, he used his iconic and super original jutsu. The protagonist had now used his Temu version of the shadow clone technique. The Unbroken Fist spatial strike was then thrown. Due to his limited reserves, Seo-woon could only generate a single copy of himself. To make things worse, the clone would disappear after a short duration. With that, the two martial artists began to move together through the forest. And so, as each of them got into position, their fists ultimately clashed. With that being said, the clone immediately disappeared. The protagonist began to think that he had reached his limit, as back in the fight with the giant swordsman, he had managed to summon 8 clones with great ease. This made him think that a problem must have occurred within him, seeing how much internal energy he had used back then. Seo-woon was now hungry and decided to go grab the meal that he had placed in his subspace, when suddenly, a bright light appeared. Just like that, the player was now once again in a different location. Just like last time, he was surrounded by many foreign languages that all expressed panic. Seo-woon called his first match upon seeing how terrified all those in the lobby were. He then theorized that games must be scheduled 2 months apart from each other. At that moment, the system started to speak. But to the protagonist's shock, it would now introduce the tutorial. This one's rather intriguing, as it didn't appear in his previous match. Seo-woon couldn't help but smile as he realized that this lobby had more beginners than the previous one. Only then did he notice someone standing on the statue. Judging from his attire, he must be a high school student. Seo-woon was left quite shocked, as this was his first time seeing another Korean in the game. The young one quickly noticed him. Seo-woon was left tired of these Gen Alpha high schoolers that would try to aura farm at any chance they would get. He quickly noticed that this player wasn't a beginner, and couldn't imagine him having more potential than Nam Sagwang. As all 200 players were now in the lobby, the game could finally start. For the players to qualify, they needed to rank in the top 200, and in order to get rewards to make it to the top 20. Hearing this made the hero realize that this was a safe match and that he didn't risk getting eliminated from the game. This greatly pleased him, as he would now try to play as the ultimate predator of the game. But to his shock, after the tutorial that he had already undergone, an unexpected rule was added. To his shock, there was an option to run duos in this match. The system explained that players are free to choose a partner from the lobby and that they would win the game if at least one of them survives until the end. As the game explained that those who won't be able to find a duo would run solo, Seo-woon finally understood why this lobby had 200 players instead of 100. The protagonist was rather intrigued, as everyone here should be strangers to each other, yet people were easily finding their deal. As in the end, choosing a weak partner would mean picking up that weight. This made our hero think of asking the high schooler to become his teammate, as he must be an experienced player who could prove his usefulness. But to his shock, he wasn't on the statue. In fact, the high schooler, that he assumed was trying to look for a partner, had completely disappeared. Seo-woon began to panic and decided to pick a teammate quickly. The first one he asked to be his partner turned out to be already in a duo. The second was no different. In fact, everyone he asked had already found a partner for themselves. Seo-woon was certain that there were still players who were alone, but it would be impossible to locate them in this huge crowd. Since the game started, our hero's hand was forced. He had no choice but to drop in the lobby alone and eliminate everyone. And with that being said, the first day of the game began. Seo-woon quickly spotted a small village with houses that seemed to have pretty good loot. And so, without wasting any more time, he decided to drop there. While descending like a shooting star, he started to think that it would be for the best to be the first one landing in order to quickly kill those who would drop afterwards. With that being said, his feet finally hit the ground. Seo-woon, who was now on a speed run, quickly turned around. Upon spotting 6 players descending, he realized that he would have to face 3 teams at once. Even so, he rushed to their location. Our hero had revised his first match countless times and continuously trained for the second one in his room. Jin Seo-woon would finally get to execute the plan that he had come up with for this long-awaited day. Meanwhile, somewhere nearby on the map, the young mage felt dizzy from the quick landing. But just as he began to wonder where his teammate had landed, someone suddenly shattered his barrier. The mage began to panic and demanded an explanation. Seeing this, Seo-woon assumed the mage to be as good as dead. With that being said, he ordered his unbroken fist. The punch was so powerful that it penetrated the body of the poor mage. The young one coughed his insides out. Only then did the system inform Seo-woon of a new annoying feature that required him to finish off the enemy as soon as possible before his teammate arrived to heal him. And yet, just as he was about to crush the head of the magician, the protagonist felt a certain disturbance. A giant knight in armor charged at him with his lance from behind. Seo-woon managed to dodge the pointy weapon. Even so, he still got rammed by the shield. Our hero was left greatly annoyed as the teammate of the mage had appeared. He quickly got a hold of the ground and expressed how amazed he was by the power of the knight. That warrior, who seemed to be an extremely experienced close combat fighter, didn't know that the Korean had killed his partner. The most important thing about the martial art of the protagonist was knowing how to use it against opponents with weapons. Yet since there was no actual weapon user on Earth, he was only able to picture this technique. Seo-woon got rather excited as he finally got the chance to use it in-game. With that, he found himself entertained, and couldn't help but let out a smile. At that moment, the knight charged at him. Our hero quickly reacted, in order to launch his counterattack. But just as the punch and the lance were about to clash with each other, the martial artist suddenly opened his hand. He quickly evaded the spear and let it pass by him. Now out of danger, he quickly made his move. And before the knight could even realize it, he was punched in the gut. The warrior was infuriated seeing how his attack was deflected. But the protagonist wasn't done just yet, as he was able to find a hole in the defense of his enemy, and just like that, he channeled all of his might into his palm, before unleashing his hip strike that left a huge hole in the knight. The one in armor suffered great damage, but his suffering wasn't over just yet. Seo-woon, who grabbed him by the head, kneed him with such strength that even his helmet shattered. It was safe to say that the skull of the man was now broken. And just like that, the knight couldn't take it any longer. Seo-woon easily defeated the second opponent. He then placed his foot on the head of the defeated one, and smashed it into bits in order to secure himself a double kill. Seo-woon was pleased by how much vital energy the knight had, as absorbing energy was far more efficient than collecting it. Now only 2 enemy teams remained in the area. But just as the protagonist finished collecting the energy, something came flying at him. The alerted martial artist found himself dodging an arrow at the last moment. Our hero, shocked by the presence of a marksman, decided to try to locate his position. But as he started the search, another arrow was fired his way. The young man was left startled. He dodged the worst, but wasn't left unharmed. In fact, the projectile had grazed his face. Seo-woon then began to wonder if the marksman was done yet, only to then find himself dodging a tempest of arrows. Seeing this, he quickly rushed to the forest. Now, while running between the trees, Seo-woon began to wonder how the marksman was so accurate, yet was certain that he didn't have internal energy due to his weak shots. Seo-woon then began to wonder if the enemy was alone or with a teammate. With that being said, he returned to the village. Our hero theorized that locating the archer and taking him out would ultimately make his partner appear. Last game, such a situation would have left the martial artist hiding and trembling in fear, yet now he only saw enemies as life energy meals. Only then did he notice something horrifying. As a bunch of arrows were fired from a nearby house, one of them penetrated his head. At first, it seemed like our hero had lost the game from the first day. But as it turns out, this was nothing but a simple clone. The sudden disappearance of the target greatly intrigued the archer. And so, as he began to wonder about how his opponent had vanished, he was suddenly and brutally kicked in the face. Seo-woon had finally located the annoying archer, and with a simple kick, sent him flying to the door. Seo-woon was then left quite intrigued, as despite being certain he had hit something with his kick, his opponent was nowhere to be seen. But as a shadow passed him by, he came to a ground-shattering realization. Seo-woon quickly realized that he would have to face someone with a cloak of stealth. Only then did he notice a shadow behind him, which left him startled. Just like that, an arrow was fired out of nowhere, and yet our hero managed to dodge it just in time. Due to the powers of the cloak, Seo-woon couldn't feel the archer that was now escaping, getting behind him. The player quickly realized that he was in a tough situation. Realizing that he couldn't win the fight against the martial artist, he tried to run for his life. But little did he know, Seo-woon wouldn't let him slide. And just like that, the protagonist made his move. He started to follow his target through the village. The poor archer found himself running away in panic. Then suddenly, the one he tried to escape from appeared right in front of him. Seo-woon explained to the marksman that it was a mistake to fight him in broad daylight while wearing this cloak. Seeing how this item was perfect for quietly climbing the ranks, Seo-woon would now kill its owner in order to acquire it. Only then did a third presence arrive at the scene. The partner of the archer apologized, as he was unable to catch up with the fast martial artist, but the marksman who was about to die couldn't care less. The dual-wielding elf pointed out how the view of the protagonist was nowhere to be seen. Seeing this, the marksman urged him to secure the kill at once. Seo-woon had now found himself in a 2v1, as he had failed to terminate the archer on the spot, and yet he couldn't help but smile as he realized that he wasn't outnumbered at all. With that being said, the swordsman charged at the martial artist. Seo-woon tilted his head towards the other guy. He quickly found himself getting shot at with a bow. The martial artist quickly evaded, making the elf the new target of the arrow, but the quick swordsman quickly deflected the projectile. With that being said, Seo-woon started to run away. He wanted to escape through the small alley between the houses. The archer was done dealing with how slippery our protagonist was, and shot him with 3 arrows at once. Just like that, our hero was hit in the back. The marksman was extremely pleased by the performance of the bow of Alex, but little did he and his teammate know they were far from out of trouble. The martial artist charged at the archer, who thought that they had won the fight. Seo-woon then pitied the man for his arrogance, and before the 2 teammates could even react, our protagonist had already struck. The archer had been penetrated from behind. Now with the first one down, he urged them to stop relying on their eyes so much. The swordsman was stunned by the skill of the martial artist and theorized that it was an illusion. Seo-woon simply claimed that he was an experienced player and explained to the swordsman that he needed to take him down in order to save the archer. At that moment, we charged at him while screaming that he would be the one left standing in the end. This greatly shocked our protagonist, and with that being said, the 2 fighters rushed at each other. Seeing how the elf was pulling out a named attack, the human decided to do the same. For the counterstrike of the protagonist to work, he needed to find a weak spot in the enemy's defense in order to strike his shoulder. But suddenly, his hand was slashed. To his horror, the elf turned out to be faster than expected. With that, the swordsman decided to continue his combo. He was able to deal great damage to our martial artist by using his bloody rush. Seo-woon began to think of how this attack was different from anything he had experienced, and how he would have died if it wasn't for his internal energy shield. The swordsman then pointed out how intriguing it was to see that his core wasn't as deep as expected. He then explained that he couldn't care less about how the martial artist survived or even copied him, as the next thing that he would be slicing would be his neck. Seo-woon knew very well that his only hope to win was a counterstrike, and yet he struggled to find a way to counter the quick movements of his opponent. Only then did he remember that he was safe from elimination in this match. Seeing this, he decided to execute a daring move. Seo-woon had the crazy idea of trying to see if he could locate the presence of his opponent without relying on his eyes. He was certain that if he succeeded here, he would be able to reach the #1 spot with ease. The martial artist had spent the last 2 months training his internal energy. He was no longer the weak beginner from the first game, but one of the internal energy masters with the most potential. In the end, the thought finally opened his eyes. The blades were dropped to the ground. The elf, who was now immobilized, was baffled to see that he had actually blocked his ultimate strike with great ease. At that very instant, Jin Seo-woon unlocked something hidden in himself. Before the swordsman could even start begging for his life, our protagonist crushed his collar with his bare hands, securing his 4th kill. Naturally, the powerful swordsman possessed great life energy and even dropped some sweet items like a healing scroll. After using the healing item, our hero decided to start scavenging the map for items. His only regret was the fact that he had damaged the cloak of invisibility. The cloak wouldn't function if damaged and would require either a special scroll or a craftsman in order to restore it. Seo-woon decided to keep it anyway and look through the rest of the items. One of them was the bow of Alex, the archer, that imbued arrows with a little bit of lightning magic, which was odd, as no lightning was felt back in the fight. Seeing how there was also a skill book that gave the user the ability to multi-shoot arrows, he understood that the opponent only picked up archery in the game. With that, he quickly used the skill book on himself. Seo-woon decided to put his new abilities to the test. He then proceeded to fire an arrow at a nearby wall. The bow of Alex was a certain upgrade from the crossbow that he had used back in the first game. With that, Seo-woon decided to ignore the last remaining team for now and make some time in order to rest and collect items. While hunting for weapons, he theorized that he could only get his hands on low-tier items as there were so many houses, and started to pray for something good. Only then did the martial artist notice something outside. There was an unusually tall structure in the middle of the village. This type of building usually contains a decent quality of loot, and thus, he rushed there immediately. From the looks of it, he was the first one here, which is why he decided to scavenge the entire place. Seo-woon decided to close the door behind him in order to stay wary. Shortly after, upon exploring almost the entire tower, the protagonist began to pray for one decent item. But in the end, he realized that there was nothing for him here. The annoyed hero quickly punched the wall in frustration. In the end, his luck in this game was either incredibly good or like a 5-leaf clover, when suddenly, something caught his eye. He had now spotted the remaining team that landed in this village. Seeing how they were focused on scavenging, he began to wonder if he could take them on his own, as they might have gotten some good weapons. With that, the martial artist tried to come up with a way to quickly eliminate the 2 enemies. At that moment, he spotted something game-changing. From the looks of it, the 2 players were about to enter the tower. Seeing how the door was closed, they quickly deduced that they were the first ones to enter it. Those who were excited to find a healing scroll had no idea that someone was lurking above their heads. Seo-woon, who purposely skipped the healing scrolls as he had acquired too many of them, had accidentally created the perfect trap. He proceeded to jump at the 2 players, certain that they were beginners. Seeing how they were excited by simple healing scrolls, Seo-woon was determined to start the fight by scoring first blood. The clueless beginners then spotted a mysterious shadow on the ground. Just like that, after executing a spectacular and unnecessary pirouette, the protagonist finally landed on the ground. Seo-woon stated that there was a possibility the enemy was a strong mage. In that case, he would have a barrier up. And seeing how fragments of energy shattered everywhere, his assumption turned out to be right. The pair began to panic as an enemy dropped straight out of the sky. With that, our hero decided to end the battle with his next attack. At that moment, the mage tried to attack him with fire. One hit from the flames would have left our protagonist with critical damage, and thus, he immediately jumped out of harm's way. This led the flame spell to turn into friendly fire, leaving the warrior ablaze. The blonde one, in panic, did his best to extinguish the flames. The viewers quickly noticed that the hero was playing solo, seeing how no one was helping him with his attack. With that being said, the one with the giant axe immediately charged at him. Even so, the martial artist kept dodging every swing of the giant weapon with great ease. In anger, he swore to kill the protagonist. But as he dodged his last blow, the warrior hit something. This left the warrior quite horrified. In the end, the swing that our protagonist evaded ended up in the gut of the mage. And before the two of them could even react, Seo-woon attacked the mage from behind and crushed his skull. With that being said, his number of enemies was reduced from 2 to 1. In front of this, the warrior was left horrified. And thus, he dropped his armor on the ground. Now half naked, the one with the beard was left quite angered. Seeing this, the protagonist deduced that his opponent was faster without the armor and that it had been weighing his speed down. Without a word, he evaded the incoming axe. The martial artist decided to use one of his name attacks. This allowed him to land a powerful kick on the neck of his giant opponent. But the Viking-like warrior pointed out that his opponent in the air was forced to land at some point. With that, our hero was left horrified. The next thing he knew, he found himself getting slashed by a giant axe. In fact, the attack was so strong that it even sliced the whole tower. The firepower of the X square was no joke. With that, our hero decided to resort to his illusions. He pointed out to his giant opponent that strength alone wouldn't be enough. The warrior couldn't take it any longer and decided to strike the martial artist at once. Seo-woon evaded the incoming attack, before launching a counter that was blocked by his opponent. But little did the axe wielder know, the real martial artist was standing right behind him while he was busy battling a clone. With that being said, our protagonist decided to make his leave. This greatly shocked the man, as the one that he was just fighting was now at the doorway. Seo-woon then pointed out the cracking sounds from the tower that the man had sliced in half. With that, he decided to proceed with a little experiment. Our hero kicked the structure with all of his might. Seeing this, the warrior began to panic and started to wonder about the opponent that he was just fighting. But to his horror, it turned out that he was swinging his axe at nothing but a clone. Realizing that his demise was near, he began to beg for help. And just like that, Seo-woon began to walk away as the tower fell on his poor opponent. Seo-woon then realized that, technically, it was the tower that took out the other player and not him. He became full of curiosity, as since he wasn't recorded as the one who got the kill, his rewards were decreased. After that, the dust finally dissipated. The only thing left of the poor warrior was his hand. Seeing how there was no place for them to spawn, the chests appeared far from the death spots of the players, which saved us the trouble of digging them up. With that being said, now came the time to collect the rewards. The only thing valuable from the warrior was his gloves that gave a small strength boost. As for the mage, he possessed some new items that the protagonist didn't know existed. There was a bomb scroll, a cursed branch, a philosopher's stone, and even the 8th of a book that would only reveal its worth when all 8 pieces are collected. Now, with the cape of the mage that protected him from wind and rain, the protagonist decided to finally exit this war zone. As the map was slowly shrinking, Seo-woon saw that there must be some other players near his location. With that, he decided to make his way to the center of the map. Seo-woon started to move, as he had only found useless items in this village. He was now familiar with movement techniques which allowed him to travel far faster than during his last game. Our hero then entered a monster spawning area where countless sorts of beasts spawned. The system informed the player that there were normal monsters, powerful boss monsters with great loot, and buff monsters that gave buffs as rewards. Only then was he startled by a loud roar that he immediately recognized as the war cry of a monster. A giant pterodactyl was now fighting. A group of players found themselves facing flying and crawling reptiles. The mage asked the warrior to play as defensively as possible, while the latter urged him to watch his back. Seo-woon was intrigued by the combination of these two players. He didn't waste time and immediately aimed his bow. His goal was to terminate them at once. For that reason, he immediately fired his arrow. The monsters were powerful and fierce, yet the swordsman and the magician were able to hold their ground against them. The mage even threw a monster by using his icelands. Seeing how they would get many rewards after killing the numerous monsters, the source couldn't help but be pleased. Yet while the warrior was having the time of his life, the mage was left quite annoyed, as it took him a great deal of mana just to deal with a single monster. Only then did something reach the barrier. He quickly realized that they were now being ambushed. The magician stated to the group that they should retreat at once, as the enemy had arrived, but the warrior opposed it, as the monsters were on low health. This made the ugly one argue that their lives were in danger and that they should flee as fast as possible. Seeing how the group seemed to be arguing among themselves, Seo-woon had the idea of spreading chaos across the battlefield. And just like that, he shot his 3 arrows at once. The mage immediately noticed the incoming projectiles. The arrows were so powerful that they easily shattered his barrier. With that, the swordsman urged his partner to immediately put his shield back up. This made the mage argue once again that their priority should be to retreat at once. But the swordsman affirmed that there was too much reward at risk here and that they should just quickly farm it before leaving. Yet, to the shock of the warrior, his ally claimed that the barrier would be useless. And thus, he decided to use a new spell called Escrowed and Protect Wall. Just like that, giant stone plates started to rise from the ground. Not even the partner of the mage was able to understand this action. Our hero also questioned him putting up these walls, as it made things easier for him. With that being said, he immediately began to make his move. The mage tried to explain that this was the best way to protect themselves and save mana, but the warrior affirmed that they were now unable to locate the enemy. The ugly one tried to claim that they would be able to leave once the walls disappeared, but his partner, who had just killed a snake, couldn't care less and promised to leave him behind the next time he messed up. The consequences of the mage's mistake immediately showed themselves. Weapons that can curve the trajectory of arrows, such as bows, could easily bypass these walls. The warrior demanded the spell be cancelled, but the mage explained that it would only disappear after 5 minutes. With that being said, our hero pulled out something from his subspace. He quickly imbued the exploding scroll, which would detonate after 10 seconds, into one of his lightning arrows. Woon decided to quickly use it, and so, he raised himself and aimed the arrow. Just like that, the projectile was released. The arrow easily bypassed the wall, and landed right in front of the enemy duo as the clock reached 0. And just like that, the exploding scroll went off. Its firepower was so devastating that it easily tore through the thick walls of the mage. Woon, who didn't expect it to be this powerful, quickly decimated the little worm that was trying to bite him. With that being said, the already ugly mage was burned to a crisp. Yet from the rubble, one hand emerged. The warrior couldn't help but blame the mage. Because of his foolishness, he had almost lost his life. But only then did he realize something horrifying. Now stuck under the rubble, the warrior found himself in front of a ball aimed at him. Woon explained that he easily won due to the incompetence of the mage. In the end, the warrior pointed out how he still had much to learn and how picking the right partner was, in fact, a skill. And just like that, he peacefully accepted his unavoidable fate. Seeing how the box immediately appeared, it made our hero realize that the mage had lost his life first in the explosion. Inside the chest of the swordsman, he found a swordsmanship book, a movement book, and even a manuscript for footwork. But in the end, since he was a martial artist, these swordsman skills were useless to him. Yet the hero didn't come out empty-handed from the battle, as the warrior did possess the ring of Toka that increases magic resistance. Shortly after, he spotted another chest appearing nearby. This one belonged to the mage. Woon was happy to have finally found the escrow necklace that was entirely made of gold. There was also a Circle 4 magic book in the chest that our hero couldn't learn, as it was far too advanced for him. Only then did he notice the monsters behind him. After a few minutes, the martial artists started to pity the mage and the swordsman, as they had struggled while facing such pathetic creatures. But upon taking the creatures down, our hero found something on the ground. The monsters had dropped some rewards upon death. He had found the tear of Lamia that was an ingredient for Neuro's spells and a necklace that gives his agility a slight boost. Our hero quickly realized that the second item could be useful, yet failed to see the utility of the first one. Later on that day, while alone as he was meditating, the protagonist began to think that the boss monsters must give their slayer a huge, game-changing buff or advantage. But before trying to go after one of them, he needed to consider whether he was strong enough to take it down on his own or not. And he also had to see if other players had the same thought process as him. The second day of the game dawned. Seeing how 60 players were taken out on the first day, and that he had killed 8 of them, Woon was somehow pleased with his KDA. The priority of our protagonist was to get to the center of the map before anything else. Unlike the first match, the weather in this one was quite harsh and hot. This made our hero think that it would have been better to travel at sunset. Only then did he notice a shadow hovering above his head. The experience of the players screamed to him that this bird was carrying supply items, and as soon as the chest was dropped, he rushed to check it out. This chest was huge and different from the others. This treasure chest would grant its opener great items in exchange for his location to be revealed to everyone every half an hour for most of the day. Now our hero was confronted with a critical choice. Then again, since there was no elimination risk in this game, the player assumed that he could safely take the risk. And just like that, Woon opened the great treasure chest and was amazed by what he had found in it. Our video ends here. If you liked it, leave your like. See you next time. Bye-bye.